I used to make a living delivering food, until my girlfriend dumped me for being broke. Shocker, right? So I thought going for a hike would help clear my mind. Brilliant idea. Honestly, peak decision-making on my part. Down poured the rain, making the mountain trail super slick. I took a nasty spill and cracked my skull right against a boulder. Blood went flying everywhere, and I passed out like a dying battery. When I finally came to, awesome, except totally not. Not cool in the slightest. I'm lying beside a pile of corpses. Blood is splattered all over the place. And this terrified, blood-soaked girl is clinging onto me like a giant plushie. My head is pounding with insane agony. And out of nowhere, a rush of memories that aren't even mine start flooding in. Turns out, I'm definitely not in my original body anymore. My soul got shoved inside some 14-year-old kid, back in a freaking Stone Age. Welcome to the Falling Water Tribe, a whopping population of around 30 people. We're talking rock-bottom misery here. Everyone is so skinny. You could count their rib cages from across the settlement. Apparently, I'm considered tall for a caveman, standing at roughly 175 centimeters. But I weigh about the same as a hollow pool noodle. Nobody in this place has ever washed themselves. And I mean literally ever. My skin tone is best described as sickly yellow, mixed with a tan of sheer depression. The girl hugging me? That's Luo Shur, daughter of the tribe's chief. Looks like we grew up together. The entire tribe only has 6 kids total. 6? That's not a real tribe. That's just a playgroup. Alright, so here's what went down before I ended up in this body. The chief, a massive guy, with bronze skin named Black Bull by everyone, finally managed to catch a mountain goat. Just one single goat. Yet the whole village was going wild with hype. Considering the last time anyone tasted meat was a month ago, these poor folks have been living off wild berries for so long that half of them can't even see a thing once night falls. Severe vitamin A deficiency will do that to you guys. So Black Bull and his 14 hunters were dragging the goat back home, feeling like absolute kings when, guess what? The wolf tribe had been stalking them all along. These guys are the local neighborhood tyrants. Over 100 members, all buff, well-fed, and dripped out in thick animal pelts. Like they're rocking prehistoric Gucci. They regularly eat animal organs, giving them crystal clear night vision. Whereas my people are walking into trees the moment the sun drops. The wolf tribe leader commanding this trap goes by Green Wolf, a real sweetheart, as you can tell. Pure evil, actively ruthless. The type of villain who'd kick puppies for fun. Except dogs haven't even been domesticated yet. Green Wolf stationed his squad along both sides of the gorge and waited while our hunters walked straight into the kill zone, laughing and joking, totally oblivious. Suddenly, stone spears came raining down on them, like the deadliest hailstorm in history. 4 of our hunters collapsed right on the spot, spears impaled cleanly through their chests, dead within seconds. Black Bull bellowed at everyone to form a tight defensive ring, and then he completely snapped, going total savage mode. He ran a member of the wolf tribe right through, with his spear in one clean thrust. Green Wolf decided to step up and handle him himself, and these two started throwing down like it was an action movie. Leap, slash, parry, and spin. Black Bull spot an opening at last, and buried his spear straight into Green Wolf's thigh. Green Wolf collapsed onto the dirt, screaming in pain. Black Bull was just about to deliver the final blow, when 2 more spears came flying straight at him. He dodged them and pulled off this wild full 360 spin, sweeping his spear right around his waist, which forced everyone back and gave our crew a chance to run. Black Bull held down the fort all by himself, looking like a straight-up prehistoric action hero. Green Wolf went limping all the way back to his leader, Black Wolf, to lay out the whole embarrassing defeat. Black Wolf completely lost his mind, because nobody messes with his crew and gets away clean. So he dispatched Blood Wolf, yep. Every single one of them is named Wolf, super creative, along with over 20 fighters to completely wipe us off the map. Slaughter every guy and kidnap all the women. You know, classic caveman bad guy behavior. Blood Wolf actually licked his spearhead and started laughing, just like some psychopath straight out of a horror flick. And that brings us right to where I am today. Stuck with a starving tribe, 0 showers, no food delivery, and a squad of juicehead cavemen, marching straight for our front door. Man, I really should have stayed in bed. So right after the wolf tribe nabbed our goat, and took out 4 of our guys, we were down to just 10 men, with 5 of them banged up. The entire tribe just sat around, looking like the most depressing group picture you've ever seen. As for dinner, a whopping 2 sour fruits per person. Truly 5-star fine dining guys. Black Bull decided we were going to pack our stuff and bounce at dawn. Track down a new spot and start over. Great plan, except for one tiny problem. Blood Wolf and 20 of his guys ambushed us that very night. Now here's the best part. Our tribe hasn't even figured out how to spark a fire yet, meaning our whole campsite was pitch black. Meanwhile, those wolf tribe creeps eat so many raw organs that they can basically see in the dark like cats. We were literally sleeping through a horror movie setup without even knowing it when they suddenly raided the camp. One of our dudes got speared before he could even open his eyes, blood splattering everywhere. Black Bull grabbed his weapon and charged right into the chaos. More of our people started going down, and then blood sprayed right across Luo Shi's face. And there she was, hauling my knocked-out self around like a sack of potatoes, while everyone was getting slaughtered around us. I finally woke up right in the middle of this absolute nightmare. My head was completely scrambled, but Luo Shi yanked me right to my feet. Black Bull roared at the women and kids to get out of there. And just like that, we were all running for our lives into the dark mountains, while our fighters put up a desperate last stand behind us. Black Bull took a spear straight to the arm, but our guys dragged him back and kept on retreating. Lucky for us, though, we knew these mountain trails way better than the wolf tribe, and those huge, muscle-bound idiots kept busting their knees in the dark. We managed to put some distance between us, and then things got even crazier. That's when actual wolves made their entrance. Legit wolves, complete with glowing red eyes. Right in the middle of the woods, we were completely trapped. Unhinged cavemen closing in from behind, and a ravenous wolf pack waiting right ahead. Honestly, a dream scenario for a guy who was literally dropping off noodle orders just 2 days ago. Surprisingly, though, those wild wolves ended up being our lifesavers. Blood Wolf's gang caught sight of the beasts and decided that hunting us wasn't worth turning into wolf chow. So they pulled back. I've never been more thankful for deadly predators in my entire life, except for one small problem. Now we had around 30 wolves surrounding us instead. Talk about a great trade-off. But that's when my survival instincts finally booted up. All those random survival videos I used to binge watch on my phone back in my previous life were actually coming in clutch. I managed to spot a cave nearby, and then I noticed some Sanchi herbs sprouting in the grass. I somehow picked them out under the dim moonlight. Shout out to my countryside upbringing for that one. I mashed it up with my teeth and plastered it onto Black Bull's gushing wound. Right before he completely passed out on us, the entire tribe gaped at me like I just worked some miracle. Even the tribe's elder shaman gave me this strange look, like she was putting together pieces of a puzzle she never saw coming. I ordered everyone to form a defensive ring, putting the women, kids, and elderly right in the center, while keeping the warriors on the perimeter. And we slowly moved toward that cave, looking like the most terrified conga line in human history. Once we got everyone inside, the men took up positions at the opening. Black Bull held down the front line, armed with just one good arm and a spear. So, here's my situation. I'm staring out into the dark at 30 pairs of eerie red eyes. Pitch blackness, no fire, 0 proper weapons, and just 7 half-starved guys standing between us. And becoming an all-you-can-eat wolf buffet. Man, seriously miss my old gig delivering takeout. Alright, picture this setup. I'm crammed inside a pitch-black cave. A horde of wolves waiting outside with those freaky, glowing eyes. My new tribe is literally starving. Our chief is bleeding out. And my biggest accomplishment in life so far was slinging fried rice orders on a moped. Yet, everyone is staring at me like I'm somehow supposed to save the day. Naturally, my brain did what it always does under extreme pressure. It started playing random YouTube clips from memory. Off-grid survival guides, camping tutorials, even that wild guy who builds luxury pools in the jungle, using nothing but his bare hands. And somewhere between, top 10 wild wilderness survival hacks and primitive bushcraft 101. A crucial memory unlocked. You can actually spark a fire just by friction rubbing sticks together. Sounds simple enough, right? Wrong. So unbelievably wrong. I announced to Black Bull that I was going to create fire. The guy looked at me like I just claimed I was going to fly straight to the moon. Every single person in the tribe wore that exact same expression, as if they were looking at a ghost. As it turns out, in this world, only the massive, dominant tribes possess fire. For small tribes like ours, it's not just that we don't have it. We're actually terrified of the stuff. Fire is basically considered pure magic here. It's like telling a crowd of medieval peasants that you're about to pull out a smartphone and DoorDash a pizza. She was staring right at me with these giant, hopeful eyes, and I could tell she had complete faith in me, despite having 0 logical reason to. Just pure, unadulterated trust. No pressure at all, right? Meanwhile, Black Bull stationed the men right at the cave mouth, armed with their spears, while the women took positions behind them, clutching rocks the size of fists. That was literally our entire defensive lineup. Pointed sticks and rocks against 30 wild wolves. I had to move fast. I frantically scrambled around the cave floor, searching for dry timber. Managed to locate a few good pieces, grabbed a sharp stone shard, and began shaving off thin wood flakes. Tiny curls of bone-dry wood dust started piling up on a bed of soft, dry twigs. Next, I grabbed a stick about as thick as my finger, pressed it straight against the wood shavings, and started twirling it violently between my hands, as fast as I humanly could, but nothing was happening. I spun it even faster, still total silence. My palms were burning like crazy, sweat was pouring down my forehead, and outside I could hear those wolves closing in. The tribe was watching me, their panic visibly rising by the second. The look on their faces basically said, "This kid has completely lost it, and we're all dead meat." I kept grinding anyway, my hands on absolute fire, ironically the only fire anywhere in sight right now. And I was drilling that stick so furiously, I thought my arms were going to pop out of their sockets. Every survival YouTuber always made this look effortless. They just casually rubbed two sticks together, while giving a soothing voiceover. And boom, instant campfire. Conveniently, nobody ever mentions the 20 solid minutes of arm shredding agony you have to endure first. Those guys are total frauds. But right then, I caught it. A tiny trail of black smoke, curling up from the wood shavings. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest, so I spun even harder, and little orange embers started glowing in the pile. Tiny, fragile. Literally the most precious embers in human history. I super carefully scraped a few more wood shavings, directly onto the glowing ember, leaned down close, and began softly blowing on it. This was the make-or-break moment where one wrong move ruins everything. Blow too hard, and you snuff out the ember. Blow too softly, and nothing catches. I found a steady, gentle rhythm, treating it as delicately as a floating soap bubble. The embers grew, catching onto each other, and began glowing brighter and brighter. I tossed on a handful of dry grass, and suddenly, whoosh, fire. An actual, real, beautiful, absolutely glorious fire. The whole cave lit up like someone just flipped a light switch. Shadows began dancing across the stone walls. Waves of warmth radiated through the air, and every single member of the tribe straight up lost their minds. The medicine woman, the shaman, spontaneously started chanting in some ancient language I couldn't comprehend, her eyes wide and glistening with tears. The rest of the tribe literally dropped straight to their knees and began bowing down to the flames, worshipping the fire like I had just summoned a literal deity right before their eyes. Even Black Bull just stood there staring at the blaze, his jaw completely dropped in utter disbelief. Luoshi stared at me like I was a miracle worker. Meanwhile, right outside, a pack of 30 wolves caught one glimpse of the blazing fire and instantly decided they were way out of their depth. They bolted so fast, it was like the flames had just personally offended their whole bloodline. And just like that, our biggest threat vanished into the night. I stood there with blistered hands, soaked in sweat and covered in dirt, realizing all those hours spent watching survival tutorials, instead of working my delivery job, had finally paid off in full. I instructed the women to gather extra wood and branches to keep the fire burning, then station guards at the cave opening. Since no one else knew how to manage a fire, I had to babysit the flames all night long, somewhere out in the dark. I caught the faint glow of the rising sun on the horizon. Dawn was breaking. We had actually made it through. That night completely changed my status in this tribe. Before the fire, I was a total nobody. The kid whose body I took over used to just pick fruit alongside the women, the absolute bottom of the food chain. The chief wouldn't even spare him a second glance. But fire? Fire is literally the voice of the gods in this primitive era, and I had just spoken it fluently. Black Bull and the shaman finally showed me some real respect, for the first time ever. So when I brought up the idea of moving the tribe, they actually gave me a hear out. Black Bull brought up a location called the Yellow River Valley, packed with game, fresh water, and solid natural defenses surrounded by mountains. It sounded ideal, so we agreed to move out at sunrise. When morning came, the wolves were long gone, and I pitched the relocation plan to the entire tribe. Of course, some people didn't want to go. Classic human logic. Your home was just destroyed. An enemy tribe is actively hunting you down. You almost got torn apart by wolves. Yet somehow a few folks are like, I kind of like the vibe here. Luckily, Black Bull and the shaman threw their weight behind me, and everyone hesitantly fell in line. There was just one huge problem, though. No one had eaten, and the whole tribe was running on fumes. The elders could barely stand on their feet, and the kids were practically dragging themselves. We desperately needed food before moving anywhere. Then I spotted a stream near the cave that was swarming with fish. Huge ones, easily 2, 3, or 4 to 5 pounds each, just casually swimming around like they owned the place. I announced that we were going fishing, and the tribe stared at me like I was trying to grab clouds out of the sky. Turns out, primitive humans had zero clue how to fish. Their whole strategy was literally charging into the water and smacking it with a stick, which, shockingly, didn't work at all. The fish would see them coming a mile away and vanish into thin air. Because of that, everyone here considered fishing an absolute waste of time, even worse than foraging for sour berries. And that was really saying something. I led the group over to a nearby bamboo grove, found some sharp stone edges, and started chopping down bamboo stalks, roughly matching the width of my thumb. Seeing my plan, the hunters quickly joined in to assist. Together, we chopped up 7 or 8 stalks. Next, I ground the tips against rough stones until they were sharp enough to skewer a fish effortlessly. With the weapons ready, class was now in session. I gathered 7 hunters into the running water and broke down the ultimate trick. Never strike where the target seems to be, target lower. Water warps light, a phenomenon called refraction, meaning the fish isn't actually standing where your eyes place it. You have to thrust below its visible image. These battle-hardened men, who brawl with wild beasts on a daily basis, gazed at me like I was lecturing higher-level physics. Still, they waded into the current, holding motionless in anticipation. A full hour ticked by. 0 results. Everyone's patience was wearing out, faster than our remaining food supply. Murmurs of frustration began among the men, and I could literally feel their skepticism radiating off them, like heat from a roaring fire. Right then, I thrust my makeshift spear down and hauled up a catch. A gorgeous, thrashing 3 to 4 pound, silver-scaled fish. I hoisted it up high, sending their jaws straight to the floor. Instantly, every single one of them became true believers. From that moment on, the fish started piling up rapidly, one right after another. In no time flat, we pulled out over a dozen solid catches, more than enough to feed our group of 20-plus starving cave dwellers. However, this is where my 21st century soul took a massive hit. These primitive people had 0 culinary skills. They had never used fire prior to today, and not a single soul thought to combine fire with cooking. As for the catch, they simply gutted the creatures, scraped off the scales using sharp rocks, and began devouring the uncooked fish flesh, as if it were a delicious snack, blood dripping down their chins, and scales scattering everywhere. It looked straight out of a horror movie, produced by a seafood buffet. I forced down a couple of bites, raw fish with no seasoning, not even a squeeze of lemon, just cold, slimy, bloody river meat pulled straight from the water. My digestive tract was screaming in agony, in multiple languages. But hey, energy is energy, and a brutal march still lay ahead of us. Our main objective now was reaching the Yellow River Valley, before the enemy tribe realized we were still breathing and came back to finish the job. Munching on my dreadful uncooked breakfast, I glanced over at my battered tribe of injured warriors and starving families, thinking to myself, somewhere back in time, there's a comfy apartment equipped with modern plumbing and a microwave, yet I somehow ended up stuck with this. Time to go find our new territory. Gagging down a few more bites of that raw meat, I nearly lost my entire stomach content. My insides were throwing an absolute fit, but calories are calories, and my body finally regained a bit of stamina. Once everyone finished their meal, we packed up the remaining fish for the trek. Time to set off for the Yellow River Valley, prior to the wolf tribe returning to finish us off. However, there was one major problem bothering me. Our gear was straight up embarrassing. A few wooden sticks and some rocks. That was literally our entire arsenal. We were about to trek through a wasteland crawling with wolves, leopards, and, according to my newly unlocked memories, even saber-toothed tigers. Yeah, actual saber-toothed tigers. Honestly, I didn't even realize those things were real. I figured they only existed in museum exhibits and animated Ice Age movies. Yet here we were, preparing to pass right by them, armed with nothing more than glorified toothpicks. I desperately needed to upgrade our firepower fast. Naturally, my first instinct was to make bows and arrows, but I had no way to craft a proper bowstring. We had no cured animal tendons on hand, nor any plant fibers strong enough to hold up, so bows were out of the question. I sat there racking my brain, mentally searching through every history doc and wilderness survival video I had ever binged. And then, out of nowhere, total stroke of genius. The Atlatl, the ultimate spear thrower. This single weapon literally reshaped human history. Now, for those of you who don't watch, Ancient warfare breakdowns. At 2 o'clock in the morning. An otlotl is basically a notched stick, designed to hurl a spear at high speed. It acts like a leverage extension of your arm. Your average person can throw a spear maybe 70 or 80 meters. But with an otlotl, you're hitting 200 meters easy. It's like upgrading from tossing a baseball to firing a literal missile. And the absolute best part? It requires almost zero physical strength. Even the women in the tribe could use it with ease. This bad boy was practically the assault rifle of the Stone Age, and I was about to hand them out like free candy. I whipped up a few quick prototypes, showed the hunters the basic technique, and geared everyone up with 5 or 6 wooden javelins apiece. Sure, we were still just a ragtag, starving group of cavemen, but now we were a ragtag, starving group of cavemen, packing rocket launchers, relatively speaking, of course. Before setting off, I crushed up another batch of Sanchi herbs and treated our injured guys. Primitive humans heal insanely fast. As long as the wound doesn't get infected, these dudes bounce back like nothing ever happened. Their immune systems are pretty much made of pure steel and sheer stubbornness. And just like that, we hit the road. Around 20-something of us, marching through untamed prehistoric wildlands, toward an uncharted territory none of us had ever set foot in. The elders were shuffling along slowly. The kids were struggling to keep up, and the women were carrying whatever supplies they could haul. Our hunters formed a defensive perimeter around the group, brandishing their shiny new spear throwers, looking roughly 30% more confident than they did yesterday, which basically meant they went from utterly terrified to mostly terrified. Oh, and then there was Luo Sure. Man, this girl could not stop staring at me. Every single time I caught her looking, she'd instantly jerk her head away and pretend to be super interested in a random tree. Her whole face was turning bright pink, hidden right beneath the grime on her face. She assumed I was totally oblivious, but I caught it every single time. See, in this era, romance is a whole different ballgame. Forget about swiping on apps or awkward first coffee dates. And nobody ever says, let's just be friends. If two people feel that spark, they pair up, period. Simple as that. The women here are looking for strong men who can keep them fed and safe, because daily survival literally hinges on it. Naturally, the big muscular cavemen are top tier, and the ladies they go crazy for are the tall, thick ones built to pop out a child, the size of a toddler. But Luo, she doesn't fit that ideal whatsoever. She's tiny and slender, likely undernourished her entire life. Yet to me, she's stunning, with delicate features, huge expressive eyes, a cute oval face, slender brows, and small, dainty lips. Honestly, she looks like an actress straight out of a K-drama that my ex used to force me to watch with her. The same ex who kicked me to the curb for being broke. Man, life works in crazy ways. I literally had to die and respawn in the Stone Age just to meet a girl who looks at me like I'm her whole world. Right then and there, I swore I was going to protect her and this entire tribe with everything I've got. The universe handed me a second shot at life, and there was no way in hell I was blowing it. I got it the first time. About halfway through our trek, we ran straight into a wild boar. Now, back before I introduced the otlotl, a wild boar would have been an absolute nightmare to deal with. Those beasts are vicious, lightning fast, and pack a solid 200 to 300 pounds of pure, pissed-off bacon. But armed with our upgrade, the hunters launched their spears from a super safe distance and took it down like seasoned pros. It was easily the cleanest, smoothest hunt this tribe had ever pulled off, and everyone felt it. We roasted that boar over a campfire. I sparked up, and the whole tribe stuffed themselves until they were genuinely full. And I mean truly full. Some of these folks hadn't felt that in months, maybe even years. The sheer happiness on their faces as they chewed hot, juicy pork. Man, I really wish I had a camera on me. It was pure, unadulterated bliss. Little kids running around with greasy hands and huge grins. The elders tearing up with emotion. And Black Bull devouring enough meat for 3 grown men, with just his one good arm. As for me, I finally got a real meal in me too, after surviving days on raw fish and sour wild berries. That fresh, fire-roasted boar tasted like the most legendary thing I had ever tasted. No seasonings, no fancy sauces, just raw fire and meat. Plus the insane relief of not having to gag while swallowing. After 2 more days of marching, we finally arrived at the Yahello River Valley. The place was gorgeous, but terrifyingly wild at the exact same time. Lush greenery everywhere you looked, a massive lake glistening in the sun, and wildlife roaming freely all over. Deer, rabbits, plenty of game I could easily hunt, but also packs of wolves casually prowling the area. wild beasts hiding in the tree line, and an overall atmosphere that screams everything wants to murder you. A couple of wolves actually clocked our presence, figured we weren't worth the effort, and just strolled off. I've never been so thankful to be totally uninteresting. To a deadly beast after scouting around, we picked our spot. A level patch on top of a cliffside, roughly 10 to 12 feet above the lake, sitting right beneath us for fresh water and fishing. High ground meant nothing could creep up on our rear, plus plenty of room to construct a real settlement. It was ideal well. Primitive caveman which is slightly different from modern luxury condo. Ideal, but I'll definitely take it. I shifted into full construction mode right away. Top priority was put up a fence. 3 sides of wooden barricades protecting our campsite before nightfall arrived because I was well aware of what happens when you catch Z's. Without any defense in a place like this, wolf attacks happen, hostile tribes happen. Straight up nightmare scenarios happen, so I dispatched work parties to gather timber. There were tons of logs scattered across the shoreline, left behind by previous floods while they did that. I grabbed a few men and began digging post holes, right where the fence posts were going. We shoved the timber deep into the ground, packed heavy mud around the bases, and started raising. Wall after wall after wall. No lunch breaks, no chatting around the water cooler. Just raw, desperate survival hustle, driven by the terrifying memory of 30 wolves, glaring at us like we were dinner. By the time the sun hit peak noon, everyone was drenched in sweat and groaning from exhaustion. Yet I couldn't afford to give them a break. If those barricades weren't finished before darkness fell, we'd be sleeping like an all-you-can-eat buffet for every monster lurking in this valley. Luckily, the tribe had plenty of food from the boar leftovers, plus the dried fish we brought along from the creek. So at least nobody was pulling manual labor on an empty stomach. By late afternoon, our 3 walls were finally complete. I left a gap in the front wall to serve as a gateway. During daytime, everyone could pass through without trouble. And come nightfall, we'd seal it shut using heavy logs bound together. Basic but effective. Our tiny makeshift base looked like the most pathetic fortress on Earth. But hey, it was our pathetic fortress, and nothing was breaching those barriers without making a ton of noise beforehand. That evening, I lit a massive bonfire right in the middle of camp, and finally did the one thing I've been dying to do ever since getting thrown into this hellish world. I grabbed the remaining raw meat, skewered it onto wooden sticks, and propped them right beside the flames to roast. The tribals stared at me, as if I were performing some sort of forbidden dark magic. Their entire lives, they had only ever eaten raw flesh. The whole idea of cooking was as incomprehensible to them as advanced physics. The moment the meat began to sizzle, and that mouth-watering aroma of roasted pork started wafting across the encampment, literally every single one of them started drooling. Yet not a soul moved an inch. They just stood frozen, gulping down their spit, too terrified to lay a hand on this bizarre heated meat. I passed a portion to Black Bull and another to the Woo, and they exchanged glances like 2 guys, daring each other to take a cold plunge. Black Bull took the first bite, and his eyes widened instantly, his jaw freezing for a split second, before he began champing down faster and faster. I swear, I actually caught a single tear streaming down this hardened warrior's cheek. The Woo bit into his, letting out a sound that I can only describe as a total spiritual awakening. Luoshi grabbed a piece right after, nibbling away with these dainty, tiny little bites that completely short-circuited my brain for roughly 10 seconds. Once the chief and the Woo started digging in, the rest of the group dove right in, and within minutes, you had 20 cavemen gathered around the campfire, grease dripping off their faces, stuffing their mouths with hot roasted meat. Granting impure satisfaction. Compared to yesterday's raw fish nightmare, this felt like a 5-star Michelin dining experience. So there I sat, chewing on my own piece of perfectly cooked wild boar, watching the flickering firelight illuminate their joyful faces, with only one thought in mind. Man, this meat would taste insane with a bit of salt. Just a pinch of salt. Universe, that's literally all I'm asking for. I mean, you threw me back to the dawn of human civilization, so the least you could do is hook me up with some sodium chloride. Tracking down salt officially became my top priority. It was our very first night in our brand new home, a prime piece of lakeside real estate, boasting scenic views and open concept design, 3 wooden walls, and a prayer. I organized 2 guard shifts to keep watch throughout the night, along with 2 groups of women tasked with keeping the fires lit. Everyone collapsed as if they'd just finished a marathon, which, honestly, they pretty much had. I took the first watch myself, mostly because I trusted literally no one in this tribe to stay awake when it actually mattered. The first half of the night was dead quiet and peaceful, almost cozy, with stars shining brightly overhead, the fire crackling softly, and the lake glowing right behind us. I actually started believing that maybe this spot wasn't so terrible after all, that we might actually catch a decent night's sleep for once, and that maybe the universe was finally giving me a break. Spoiler alert, the universe was definitely not giving me a break. Right around the darkest, most dead quiet, soul-crushing hour of the night, when every human being on the planet is biologically hardwired to pass out, the guards ended up falling fast asleep, every single one of them, without exception. The fire had dwindled down to a pathetic little ember, and that was the exact moment a pack of wolves arrived, looking for a midnight snack. One wolf slunk right up to the barricade, thrust its snout right through an opening, and clamped down on a sleeping guard's arm, like it was biting into a fried chicken leg. The guy let out a shriek so loud, I'm pretty sure it woke up wildlife 3 valleys over. Blood splattered everywhere, unleashing instant, utter chaos. Everyone scrambled to their feet in sheer, blind panic. I grabbed my stone-tipped spear without a second thought, lunging forward on instinct and thrusting the weapon clean through the wolf's neck. It pierced right through one side and popped out the other. The wolf let out one agonizing shriek, crimson spilling all over its coat. And just like that, it went limp. My very first kill in this realm. Definitely not how I envisioned starting my caveman journey. But here we were. The rest of the pack watched their buddy drop, and straight up lost their minds. Instead of retreating like sensible creatures, they went full rabbit mode. They began flinging themselves against the barricade, gnawing on the timber and snarling wildly, desperately trying to tear the whole structure down. I yelled at everyone to strike back, and our hunters started thrusting spears right through the gaps. A bunch more wolves got impaled, and blood was painting our shiny new palisade a lovely shade of horror movie crimson. That's when I spotted it, perched on a ridge off in the distance, observing the chaos. Like a commander surveying a war zone. A snowy white wolf, the Wolf King himself. This beast was an absolute unit. Its fur practically gleamed in the moonlight, so thick and pristine. It looked like it had its own high-end skincare routine. Its eyes were chilling, cunning, and terrifyingly smart. This wasn't just some stray mutt hunting for food. This was an alpha, and he was absolutely furious about losing his troops. The Wolf King let out this haunting, long howl that basically translated to, "What on earth is that giant wooden wall? And why are my guys getting wiped out by it?" Then he slowly strutted toward us, calculated and calm, like he owned the entire night. He began rallying the pack for round 2. My heart was pounding so hard it was echoing inside my skull. The hunters were clutching their weapons, with white knuckles, everyone breathing heavily in tense anticipation. If those wolves breached the perimeter, it was game over, no second chances, no respawn buttons, just pure carnage. The pack charged once more, with Black Bull spearheading our defense, and our guys fought like absolute demons, stabbing through every single gap available. The beast slammed into the wall so violently that the wood started groaning and buckling. A few wolves actually managed to get their heads jammed right between the wooden stakes, which was equal parts terrifying and, I gotta admit, kind of hilarious. Our hunters capitalized instantly, going down on any wolf dumb enough to get its neck pinned in our fence. Several more hit the dirt, and that's when the Wolf King made his move. While everyone was distracted by the frontal assault, this brilliant, furry psychopath flanked us from the side, took a massive running leap, and landed right atop the wall. He perched there for a split second, glaring down at us like we were items on an all-you-can-eat menu, and then launched himself straight at my throat. I felt the gust of wind before I even registered him, a surge of pure murderous aura washing over my back, as those gigantic fangs came diving right for my shoulder. I was dead meat. Total, absolute dead meat. This was the end. Farewell, cruel primitive world. Thanks for the raw fish and the terrifying wolf ambushes. Things were looking pretty grim, except I didn't actually die. And that's all thanks to a hunter named Black Panther. And yeah, believe it or not, that's his real name. Which, honestly, is pretty damn cool. This guy blitzed in faster than any human I've ever seen, lunging his spear straight for the Wolf King's chest. Right before those massive jaws could clamp down on my shoulder, the Wolf King twisted itself mid-air, chomping hard onto the spear's wooden shaft, instead of taking a chunk out of me. That split-second distraction gave me just enough time to spin around, snatch up my own spear, and jam it straight into the beast's side, putting every last bit of force my frail 14-year-old frame could muster, driving it deep inside. This time, The Wolf King didn't let out a majestic roar. It was a shriek of sheer pain and utter disbelief. It clearly never expected this skinny little human kid to fight back like that. I shoved with everything I had, literally hurling the massive beast right off the wooden palisade, sending it crashing down to the dirt below. The Wolf King dragged itself back to its feet, licked the blood off its fresh wound, glared up at me with terrifying intelligence in its eyes, and quickly ran the numbers, realizing the math just wasn't mathing. Wait, too many dead wolves, a gaping hole in its own torso, and a wall full of pissed-off cavemen armed with spears. It let out one final, echoing cry, ordering a total retreat as the entire pack scattered into the darkness, leaving 7 lifeless wolves behind in the dirt. That's 7 dead monsters and 0 casualties for our tribe. Well, except for one guy with a mangled arm. But frankly speaking, around here, that's practically an absolute win. I immediately marched right over to those guards, who had fallen asleep on shift and unleashed full wrath on them. You guys actually dozed off? Do you even realize how close we just came to dying? If we didn't have this wall up, literally every single person in this village would be wolf food. Right now, they just hung their heads in shame, looking like little kids caught red-handed stealing candy. Except this time, the candy was everyone's damn lives. Look, I get that they were completely drained. Honestly, we all were, but come on, guys. You literally had one job. After blowing off some steam, I turned my attention to Black Panther, the absolute legend who had just saved my skin. No joke, this guy more than earned his name tonight. He runs like a predator, moves at lightning speed, and apparently doesn't hesitate for even a second to shove a spear into an alpha monster's chest. I made a mental note right then and there. This man was definitely getting a promotion. If I was ever going to turn this tribe into a real civilization, I needed warriors just like him, fiercely loyal, insanely fast, fearless, and most importantly, not prone to sleeping on night duty during wolf raids. Just then, Luo came sprinting over, immediately checking me over from head to toe, searching frantically for injuries, feeling my arms, spinning me around to make sure I was okay. Once she verified I wasn't bleeding out anywhere, her entire body slumped in relief as she finally exhaled, a breath she had clearly been holding since the chaos started. Man, this girl worried about my safety, way more than I ever cared about my own, which I found to be both incredibly sweet and slightly alarming, considering she was literally drenched in wolf blood while doing it. So, I patched up our wounded guard. Honestly, the bite left a straight-up hole in his arm. Ugly as hell, but thankfully not fatal, assuming we could keep infection away. Back when I was a kid in rural China, vicious stray dogs bit me all the time, so I actually had plenty of experience dealing with this. Never thought my childhood dog bites would turn out to be legit medical experience. But hey, here we are. As morning broke, I ordered the crew to skin those wolves and harvest the meat. The elders back home always claimed wolf meat tasted sour. And today, we were about to test that theory. And guess what? It really did have a sour kick to it. Still, sour meat beats starving any day of the week, especially after surviving a wolf attack. Once we finished our breakfast of wolf steaks, look at us, eating like kings. I called a tribal meeting to lay out my big blueprint for construction. It was time to build a proper house. Mud brick walls, real shelter. No more sleeping behind a flimsy wooden fence and praying for the best. I tapped into my memories of how my grandparents built their home back in the Chinese countryside. They made mud bricks out of clay, straw, and little rocks, mixing it all together and pressing it into wooden molds. Those old houses could last for decades, and a few were even still standing. If my grandma's place held up through 50 years of harsh weather, my mud bricks could easily handle a few wolves. The only catch, we had 0 straw. I mean, this is the Stone Age, so nobody's growing rice yet. My best option was to gather wild grass instead, which should hopefully get the job done. So, I divided the whole tribe into dedicated work crews, turning us into a mini prehistoric construction company. I assigned 7 women to dig up clay, armed with nothing but pointed sticks. Not exactly heavy machinery, but we had to work with what we had. 5 kids, including Luo, headed out to harvest wild grass using crude stone knives. Meanwhile, the rest of the women were stomping around in shallow mud pits to mix everything. It was basically a primitive concrete mixer powered entirely by bare feet. As for the men, I split them into 3 squads. One team shaping bricks with me, another digging hunting traps around the camp perimeter, and the injured guys sitting back, crafting fresh, stone-tipped spears. Our 4 elders were put on pelt duty, tasked with crafting leather armor out of those 7 wolf hides. For our hunters, nothing fancy, mind you, Just enough padding to block a wooden spear shaft, or stop sharp teeth from sinking straight through. After all, a few extra layers of hide could literally mean the difference between a minor scratch and a premature funeral. Next, I taught 2 guys how to shape bricks. I built a wooden frame using bits of driftwood from the river, measuring 20 centimeters high, 30 long, and 20 wide. You pack the mud, grass, and stone mixture in tight. Scrape off the top with a grass cord to smooth it. Pop the block right out and let it bake under the sun. It took a few tries, but they quickly got the rhythm down, and before long, bricks were lined up in neat rows, looking like the world's most hideous assembly line. So then, I grabbed Black Panther along with a few hunters to set up some traps. Down by the water, we stumbled upon a natural trail where wild animals usually came for a drink, and you could literally see all the tracks in the mud. Dozens of them, like some sort of prehistoric highway. Right in the middle of it, we dug out a massive pit, planted razor-sharp bamboo stakes at the bottom, pointing straight up and disguised the entire opening with thin twigs and leaves. Black Panther just stood there staring at the finished trap, jaw wide open, and asked, "What is this even supposed to do?" I just smirked and said, "Anything that steps onto this hole plunges straight down and gets impaled by the bamboo. We won't even need to chase after them anymore. Our food literally delivers itself." The hunters exchanged glances, gazed back at the trap, and once they pictured animals wandering right into it and getting skewered, every single one of them cracked up laughing. I mean, these guys had spent their entire lives running after game, on foot using sharpened sticks, putting their lives on the line for every single meal. So the idea that dinner could literally just drop into a pit and die on its own was the funniest, most mind-blowing thing they had ever heard of. Standing there, I watched my tiny tribe hard at work. Women stomping mud, kids gathering grass, men stacking bricks, hunters crafting traps, and the elders stitching together wolf hide. And I felt a sensation I hadn't experienced since landing. In this world, real hope. We weren't just scraping by anymore. We were actually building a future. Things were moving insanely fast in our little camp of misfits. The pile of mud bricks kept growing, already topping over 300, while the wolf pelt armor was finally complete. And for the very first time, since I woke up in this prehistoric nightmare, it actually felt like we weren't just one bad night away from total extinction. I handed out the wolf leather vests to the ones who mattered most. In a frontline clash, Black Bull, Black Panther, and 4 other key hunters. Now, some might call that favoritism, but I call it keeping the spear wielders alive, so the rest of us don't end up as lunch. It's basic survival math. But then, a new problem hit me. My mouth was literally on fire. And no, not the cool action hero kind of burn. More like the, I've consumed nothing but plain roasted meat for days. My lips are cracked, and my gums are screaming in pain. Kind of hell. 0 veggies, 0 broth, absolutely no variety whatsoever. Just charred animal flesh. 3 times a day. Back in my delivery driving days, I used to complain endlessly about having to eat cheap instant ramen all the time. Man, what I wouldn't give for a single cup of instant noodles. Right about now, just one. Complete with a salty little flavor packet and everything. Honestly, I'd trade a whole wild boar for it. That's when sudden realization struck me. I needed to figure out pottery. A solid cooking pot would completely revolutionize our lives. Instead of just roasting meat over an open flame like actual cavemen. Which, okay, fair enough, we literally are. We could actually boil water, whip up warm stews, cook greens, and make our food ration stretch way further. A portion of roasted meat meant for 10 could easily feed 15 if you stretched it into a stew by tossing in some wild herbs and mushrooms. In a harsh world, where a brutal winter could wipe out your whole tribe, that level of resourcefulness was literally the difference between survival and ending up as a heap of forgotten bones. The real challenge was sourcing the right clay, since ordinary dirt just wouldn't cut it. It would shatter and blow up the moment it hit extreme heat. I was on the hunt for proper sticky clay, the exact kind termites use to construct their mounts. Anytime you spot termite nests, you know high-quality clay is close by. That's a neat piece of trivia I picked up somewhere down a YouTube rabbit hole, back when I actually paid attention in class. For once, I crafted 2 large baskets out of vines, grabbed Black Panther, and we headed toward the nearby water source. Sure enough, we hit prime termite territory. We packed both containers with dense gray clay and began trekking back. Along the way, I figured it made sense to inspect the pitfall trap we had set up the previous day. Even from afar, I noticed right away that the leafy branches hiding the pit were gone. My heart instantly started racing. We rushed over, took a look down, And right there sat a massive 200-pound wild boar, pierced deep by the bamboo stakes at the bottom. Extremely dead, super bloody. In absolute perfection. Black Panther's reaction was priceless. This guy had spent his whole existence chasing wild beasts through dense woods and bushes, risking his life on practically every hunt. And here was a giant pig that had literally waltzed into a hole and taken itself out. The whole thing blew his mind. For a good half a minute, he just froze there, jaw dropped, staring at the dead pig like he was witnessing dark magic. We rearmed the trap, secured the boar's legs together, balanced it on a sturdy wooden pole, and carried it back to base. When the tribe spotted us returning, carrying that giant black boar dangling between our shoulders, everyone started jumping around in pure excitement, like kids on Christmas morning, straight up leaping, clapping, and letting out wild grunts of joy. These people had literally never known a reliable food source in their entire lives. And suddenly, fresh meat was arriving like clockwork. It was basically like I'd introduced DoorDash to the Stone Age. I handed the boar off to the women to butcher, then immediately got to work on the pottery. I dumped all the clay into a shallow trench and began stomping on it barefoot to knead out all the trapped air pockets. The entire tribe circled around, watching me crush dirt, as if I were performing some high-level ritual dance. The Wu walked up looking utterly baffled, asking why I was messing around with soil, when there was plenty of perfectly fine dirt right inside the camp. I pointed out that this wasn't ordinary dirt. It was actually special clay that could be molded into containers and hardened using fire, right as Black Bull came hobbling over, wondering if this mud could seriously turn into a pot. He poked at it with his good hand, looking pretty doubtful, but I spent the next couple hours crafting the clay into all the essentials: a masiba cooking pod, bean bowls, and a pair of storage jars. Honestly, my sculpting skills were somewhere between a toddler's finger painting and barely functional. But hey, we weren't entering a beauty pageant here. As long as they didn't shatter when heat was applied. I figured roughly 60% of these pieces might actually make it through the firing process. Now, 60% of 20 bowls gives us 12 bowls, which is exactly 12 more than we currently have. So I'll gladly take those chances. But when I broke down for everyone what these strange clay shapes were actually for, pots to whip up stew, bowls to eat soup, and jars to hoard food, the entire tribe broke out into the most wildly enthusiastic celebration I'd ever seen. And by celebration, I mean they gathered in a circle and started doing what can only be described as chaotic, aggressive flailing with zero music playing in the background, arms flying everywhere, legs moving in random directions, heads aggressively bobbing. It looked like a rave throne, straight out of Psych Ward. Primitive dancing is a whole different beast, man. I just stood there watching over 20 grown adults completely lose their minds, performing the caveman version of the Macarena, executed by people who had never even heard of a beat. And I just thought to myself, yeah, these are my people. Of course, I couldn't just fire the pottery right away. Raw clay needs to air dry for a few days first. Otherwise, it'll warp and shatter inside the kiln. On top of that, I needed a massive pile of charcoal, which meant burning down a ton of wood into hot embers. Just more chores stacked for later. Seriously, everything in the Stone Age takes an eternity. There's no Amazon Prime, no same-day shipping around here. You want a simple bowl? That'll cost you 5 days of drying, half a day in the fire, plus a 60% chance it turns to dust anyway. So enjoy that. Later that evening, something happened that completely caught me off guard. Black Bull and the Wu called a full tribe gathering and made a huge announcement. They claimed that ever since I woke up from that head trauma, I'd become an entirely different person. I gifted them fire, brought cooked meat to the table, invented the spear thrower, set up traps that secure game while we're sleeping, and built defensive walls that saved everyone from a wolf attack. So taking all of that into account, they wanted to name me the official new chief of the tribe. Me, a 14-year-old kid, skinny as a twig, who couldn't bench press a medium-sized dog if his life depended on it. Meanwhile, Luo was beaming at me right from the crowd, her eyes glittering with excitement, practically bursting with pride, and the rest of the tribe was nodding in total agreement, as if this decision made absolute sense. I just stared down at my scrawny arms, my dirt-covered feet and a body that weighed roughly as much as a single wild boar's leg, crossed my legs and wondered, what kind of crazy reality lets a kid like me lead a whole tribe of fighters? But then I took a look around at everything we'd set up in just a couple of days. Defensive walls, deadly traps, upgraded weapons, open fires, hot cooked meals, and clay pots baking out in the sun. We went from a desperate group running for our lives to chilling behind solid wooden barricades, munching on roasted boar, And I made all of that happen. Me, this scrawny, underfed, time-traveling delivery guy actually pulled it off. I honestly tried to turn down the offer at first. I really did, but everybody kept pushing for it. And seriously, who else was even qualified for the job? Black Bull only had one usable arm left. The Wu was already 40 years old, which is basically 90 in caveman years. And Black Panther had plenty of courage, but he couldn't invent his way out of a cardboard box. So I agreed. My very first decision as chief was a complete rebrand. Falling Water Tribe sounded like a bunch of clumsy fools who stumbled into a river. It was a terrible name with total loser vibes. We were starting over in a brand new valley, armed with fresh barricades and new flames. So a new name was an absolute must. I thought back to the origins of my soul. Earth, China, an advanced civilization thousands of years in the future, and picked the name that held the deepest meaning for me. Huaxia, the ancient term for China, for home, and for everything I'd lost. Along with everything I was going to rebuild from the ground up. In this crazy primitive world, the Huaxia tribe, it just felt right. Right away, I started mapping out plans in my head. Real houses first, then a proper kiln for pottery, followed by sturdy city walls and a livestock pen. So we wouldn't have to put our lives on the line for daily hunts anymore. And if I could just locate some wheat, sweet potatoes, rice, or regular potatoes growing somewhere around this valley, we would never have to worry about starving ever again. Farming was going to be an absolute game changer. My mind was spinning so fast with ideas that I accidentally broke out into a huge grin and started chuckling to myself like a complete crazy person. The entire tribe slowly took a few steps back from me, obviously, wondering if their brand new leader had totally lost his mind. I caught myself, snapped back to reality, and told them I was just deep in thought about the tribe's future, which sounded way more respectable than admitting. I was actually just daydreaming about French fries. By the next morning, everyone slipped smoothly into their tasks, just like a finely tuned machine. The women gathered firewood while the kids trimmed grass, and the men worked on molding bricks and digging up clay. I ordered Black Panther to go inspect the traps, since Black Bull's arm was still in recovery. Our tiny little tribe, the mighty Huaxia tribe, was finally starting to look like a real community. Now all I needed was some salt, ceramics that didn't shatter into pieces, and maybe, just maybe, a hot bath. Is that really asking too much? From a Stone Age? I woke up that morning with a task list, longer than a prehistoric river. Build kilns, produce charcoal, fire up pottery, craft a working bellows, construct a proper house, and maybe squeeze in, developing a whole new line of weapon. Tech before lunchtime, just a typical Tuesday for a former food delivery guy who can barely pull off 10 push-ups. First up, the kills. I spent the whole morning slapping mud into shapes that were supposed to look like ovens. By the time I was done, I had 3 or 4 lumpy monstrosities that looked like a toddler. Had molded them during a complete meltdown. Ugly? Absolutely. Functional? Hopefully. In a world like this, looks come dead last on the priority list, right behind not getting eaten and finding actual salt. Next, I crafted a bellows, which sounds fancy, until you realize I was basically just mashing bamboo strips and mud together, whittling down a wooden plank, drilling a hole right through it, and jamming a stick inside. The engineering was about as advanced as a rock. But once I hooked it up to the kiln with a bamboo pipe and sealed all the gaps with mud, it actually worked. Air rushed in, the flames raged hotter, and I felt like a total genius. For about 4 whole seconds, before remembering, I was still stuck living in a world without plumbing. The women hauled back over 300 pounds of firewood, and I packed every bit of it into the kilns. Neatly stacked, I sparked the fires underneath, pumped the bellows until the logs caught a fierce blaze, and then plastered the kilns completely shut with mud. Come tomorrow morning, all that timber would be converted into pure charcoal. Charcoal burns way hotter than standard wood, hot enough to bake pottery, smelt raw materials, and basically make our daily survival a lot less miserable. With 3 kilns firing simultaneously, that meant 3 full batches of charcoal. By daybreak, I was practically running a mini industrial revolution, fueled entirely by mud and pure desperation. While the kilns baked through the night, I went to inspect our brick production. 400 fresh bricks today, much faster than yesterday. The 2 guys I trained were turning into full-fledged brickmaking pros. I surveyed the area for our very first real house, picking a spot about 200 meters from the river on elevated ground, complete with space nearby for a livestock pen inside the perimeter fence. It was the ideal spot close to fresh water, yet high enough that nothing could creep up on us in our sleep. Well, that was the theory, at least. Things ambushing us in the dark was kind of our specialty. So far. Just then, Black Bull and Black Panther showed up, hauling a dead mountain goat slung over a pole between them. But that wasn't even the best part. Both of them were also carrying 2 baby goats. Living, wriggling, bleeding, irresistibly cute little baby goats. The snare had caught the mother, and the kids were just standing around, looking completely lost. Black Panther whipped out his stone blade and was ready to slaughter the whole family. Right then and there, I practically tackled him. Hold up, we are not eating the babies. Everyone just stared at me blankly. It was as if I just declared we were going full vegetarian. To them, animals exist for one solitary purpose: to become dinner as fast as humanly possible. So, I had to lay down the basics of farming. Keep the goats breathing, feed them grass, and let them grow and reproduce. Only when food gets scarce do you actually eat them. Think of it like a savings account. Except this account is super fluffy and goes bah. The tribe had never heard of such a crazy concept: raising animals on purpose, instead of wildly chasing them through forests and almost dying in the process. Absolute genius. I wrapped up the mother goat's injuries, built a small pen, and assigned the women and kids to daily grass gathering. Duty for our brand new livestock. Just like that, we were officially ranchers. Granted, it was the world's tiniest, most pathetic ranch. Just 3 goats and a dream. But hey, it was a start. That afternoon, I dragged Black Panther out on an expedition that was about to alter the tribe's destiny forever. We hiked up into the hills searching for edible plants, and I accidentally stumbled upon a grove of paper mulberry trees. Now, these trees are a game changer. Their bark is crazy tough, yet flexible, making it perfect for crafting rope, bowstrings, and binding material. I honestly almost hugged one of those trees right then and there. Black Panther probably thought I was having some kind of spiritual awakening, but in reality, I was just mentally calculating how many lethal weapons I could craft. We stripped the bark off a bunch of trees and hauled it back, along with plenty of bamboo and small branches. Once back at camp, I went straight to work on my ultimate masterpiece. I heated the bamboo over the fire, gradually shaping it into a sleek, curved bow. I crafted a handful of bamboo arrows, and then Black Panther. And I processed the mulberry bark into ultra-strong cordage, twisting the fibers tightly together until we had a legit bowstring. I strung the bow, notched an arrow, pulled it back with everything I had, and let fly. That arrow soared 30 meters and slammed into a wooden post so hard that the end was still vibrating aggressively. By the time everyone rushed over to inspect it, there was total, dead silence, and then I broke out into a maniacal laugh. Why? Because I had just brought to life the absolute deadliest ranged weapon this era had ever witnessed. These people had spent their entire lives fighting with sharp sticks, chucking random rocks at prey, and chasing beasts on foot. Yet here I was standing tall, holding a device capable of sniping a target from 30 meters away without taking a single step forward. Luoshi was staring at me in complete awe, her mouth slightly agape, and her cheeks turning bright pink again. Meanwhile, the Wu looked like she was practically about to pass out from sheer excitement. The hunters were drooling over the bow, as if it were crafted from pure gold, and every single one of them desperately wanted one immediately. I could literally picture a little cartoon, hearts popping up in their eyes, only instead of love, it was unadulterated weapon lust. So, I gathered 4 of the tribe's elders, and began teaching them the art of bow and arrow crafting. There was this one old guy named Old Bear, who was apparently a legendary warrior back in his prime, and he was especially hyped up. Honestly, these elders have been feeling pretty useless, like extra mouths to feed, in a tribe that could barely feed itself. But now, they finally had a purpose, and their faces lit up like kids on Christmas morning. Old Bear's hands were literally shaking with excitement as he started crafting his very first bow. I ended up showing them how to chip small rocks into razor-sharp arrowheads and secure them tightly onto bamboo shafts. These stone-tipped arrows could easily tear right through skin and hide. My ultimate goal here was simple. Every single person in this tribe needed a bow, and at least 10 arrows, and I meant the women, the kids, and even the elderly. So if wolves ever attacked us again, or if that wolf tribe decided to pull up, I wanted a whole storm of arrows raining down on them from every angle. Plus, with our camp sitting on the high ground, we'd practically be untouchable. While the elders were busy pumping out weapons, I took the hunters to go dig out the foundation for our house. Now, actual proper construction requires a base, That's about a meter deep. But let's be real, we didn't have time for perfection. We dug about half a meter down and just called it a day. Next, we mixed up some mortar using yellow mud, water, and chopped grass, basically making prehistoric concrete, and started stacking up the bricks. It was a layer of bricks, then a layer of mortar, followed by another layer of bricks and mortar. In just a few hours, 4 solid walls were standing at head height. Look, it was easily the ugliest structure in human history. But hey, it was a real building with actual walls. That wouldn't just collapse if a wolf sneezed nearby. The very next morning, I stepped outside and immediately jabbed a sharp rock straight into the bottom of my bare foot. Instantly, a surge of agonizing pain shot up my entire leg, and I started hopping around, cursing in a language nobody else understood. That's when it hit me. Why the hell was I still barefoot? I'm a modern human soul, with thousands of years of footwear history locked inside my brain. Yet here I was, walking around, on bare feet like some primitive animal, this entire time. What a total idiot I was. So I immediately grabbed a bunch of long grass, sat down with Old Bear and the other elders, and taught them how to twist the grass in a rope, and weave that rope straight into sandals. Fast forward 20 minutes, and I was wearing the very first pair of shoes in tribal history. Now, they weren't exactly high-end sneakers, and they weren't anywhere near comfortable by modern standards, but compared to stepping on jagged rocks, sharp thorns, and whatever else was lying on the ground, it honestly felt like I was walking on clouds. The entire tribe was staring at my feet with pure, unadulterated envy. So within an hour, the elders were already mass-producing sandals for everyone. And then came the moment I had been eagerly waiting for. The kills had finally cooled down overnight, and as I cracked open the mud seal, there it was. A batch of gorgeous, absolutely perfect jet black charcoal. I grabbed 2 of the pieces and tapped them together. They gave off a sharp, clear ring that confirmed they were fully carbonized. By tomorrow, it was time to fire up the pottery. Actual cooking pots, real bowls, and legitimate hot soup. I rounded up a tall, female villager and stationed her in charge of the kiln's fire, having her feed the charcoal and operate the bellows. She was built like an absolute tank and worked without a single complaint, sweat dripping off her face like a faucet. I had to force myself to stay on task and stop losing my train of thought. My heart was already taken by Luo, that adorable girl with the dimples and cute little fangs, who looked at me like I hung the moon and stars. I shook my head aggressively to snap out of the fantasy and got back to running the construction site. There were structures to erect, pots to bake, and an entire civilization to kickstart. Romance would just have to wait until we at least had actual chairs. 700 mud bricks were baking out in the sun, looking like the most unappetizing Hershey bars imaginable, while I had a whole master architectural layout mapped out in my head. 5 houses set up in a diamond formation, with 4 at the corners for the guards, and mine right in the middle, allowing me to direct defense if we ever got ambushed. On top of that, 2 latrines and 2 bathhouses, because even cave dwellers deserve some basic standards. I was practically engineering a mini military fortress, out of pure mud, wooden sticks, and sheer hope. My own house would be constructed last, partly because that's proper leadership, but low-key. Also because I wanted mine to turn out the best, and practice makes perfect, especially when your work crew has literally never seen a real building before. We got straight to work on the first corner house. Winter was rapidly approaching, and crashing behind a flimsy wooden palisade, with hungry wolves lurking around, was getting old fast. I specifically designed the house with 0 windows, since letting freezing Arctic winds blast straight into your sleeping area is a terrible design choice in any era. Instead, I left a small peephole, just big enough to check through, and see if any wild predators outside were trying to kill us. Talk about practical luxury. The real technical hurdle, though, was the heating setup. I built an indoor fire pit, connected to a mud chimney pipe running straight through the roof. Without that exhaust pipe, lighting a fire inside would basically hotbox everyone with deadly smoke, which isn't exactly the coziest way to survive the winter. Next, I built a massive heated bed platform, a traditional Kong, modeled after the ones found in northern Chinese countryside homes. You start a fire underneath the structure, and the entire slab radiates warm heat. 10 people could easily crash on this thing, staying as warm as baked potatoes all night long. Was it fancy? Not at all. Was it better than freezing on the bare ground, while a pack of wolves eyed you up through a wooden fence? 100% yes. Meanwhile, something was lurking in the shadows from a distance, completely unbeknownst to me. That white wolf, Alpha I had impaled during the wall siege, was still alive and still out for blood. was still lying in wait on a nearby ridge, glaring down at our settlement with those sharp, bloodthirsty eyes, just biding its time to exact sweet revenge. Turns out wolves can really hold a grudge, and this beast was practically carving my name onto its hit list. Meanwhile, I was completely oblivious to my stalker, far too wrapped up in playing a one-man empire builder to worry about some yesterday's threat. Our defensive walls went up fast, reaching 5 feet, and we were set to wrap it all up by tomorrow evening. As I made my evening rounds around the base, a sudden realization hit me. Black Bull and Black Panther were nowhere to be seen. They had headed out at daybreak, and now darkness was falling. Panic settled in. These two boneheads had just gotten bows and arrows the night before, and they were so hyped up about it that they literally slept clinging to them like teddy bears. So when their hunting traps turned up empty that morning, they decided to take their new gear out for a field test. And man, did they test them out. They waddled back carrying 5 rabbits and a whole antelope, every single one taken down cleanly from long range. This was literally a historical moment for our tribe, the very first time anyone had hunted, without sprint charging right into a beast's face, just to poke it with a sharp stick. But right before I could even celebrate, 2 dark silhouettes appeared on the horizon, marching straight toward our camp. Instantly, every man grabbed a bow and lined up along the barricade, arrows fully drawn. My heart was pounding straight out of my chest. 6 guys, that was our entire defense force. Just 6 men standing against a potential full-scale raid. The women and kids huddled against the back wall, shaking in fear as the figures drew closer and closer. Then, someone squinted through the dim light and yelled, "Wait, it's just Black Bull and Black Panther." They were absolutely stacked with game, casual as hell, like they just finished a weekend grocery run. The collective sigh of relief was so massive. I was half expecting people to pass out. I, however, wasn't feeling forgiving at all. I stomped over to them, putting on my fiercest chief scowl, which honestly probably looked hilarious coming from a skinny 14-year-old kid, and laid down the law. From now on, if you're not back before sundown, you're kicked out of the tribe. End of story. 0 exceptions. Look, I wasn't trying to be a dick. If anything happened to those 2 boneheads while playing around in their prehistoric Hunger Games, the rest of our camp would be completely defenseless. They bowed their heads like scolded pups and swore they'd never pull a stunt like that again. That night, we feasted on rabbit and antelope. Not bad for a group that was choking down sour berries. Just a week prior, the next morning came, bringing the moment of truth. Pottery Day. I've been hyped for this, like a kid on Christmas morning. Well, if Christmas meant bashing open a makeshift mud furnace and praying your hand-molded clay creations hadn't shattered into useless rubble, I cracked open the very first kiln. The main cooking pot came out intact, looking gorgeous. I gave a quick tap with my knuckle, producing a clean, sharp chime when struck, meaning it was thoroughly baked and solid, without a single fracture. Next, I inspected the bowls. 5 had completely smashed to bits, which I fully anticipated, but 30 actually survived. 30 whole bowls, lifting one up toward the early sun. I felt way more fulfilled than I ever did, knocking out 300 deliveries during a single shift. In my previous life, though the basins all ended up cracked, every last one split wide open as if they'd just given up. A 60% success rate overall, landing right on my original target. Who claimed a former delivery guy couldn't handle math. I broke the news to the whole tribe, like I just unlocked the secret of electricity. Everyone cheered in excitement, even though I could tell most of them still had 0 clue what a cookware pot was actually meant for. They had heard me mention it's used for cooking food, but couldn't visualize it. These folks had only eaten uncooked meat, or roasted meat their entire existence. So the whole idea of boiling water, tossing food inside, and patiently waiting was just as foreign to them as smartphones. I pulled aside a few of the women and gave them a quick culinary crash course. Fill up the pot with water, drop in the meat, place a lid over it, and set it right on the fire. Then give it 2 hours, literally the most basic recipe in human history. Soup, plain and simple. No extra seasonings, no spices. Not even salt, just raw meat and hot water. And yet, this was bound to be the most incredible dish these people had ever experienced in their lives, because hot broth hits the human soul in a way that plain roasted meat simply never could. And speaking of salt, I was in desperate need of some, since my body was running completely on empty without it. Going long-term without salt makes you feel feeble, lightheaded, and will eventually take your life. Gulping down animal blood could supply a bit of sodium, which the tribe drank on a regular basis. However, my modern-day stomach utterly refused to go along with that specific menu option. Every single time someone handed me a bowl of warm blood, My gag reflex instantly staged a full-blown revolt. I was going to have to hunt down a salt deposit somewhere across this valley down the road. But that was a headache for future me to handle. Meanwhile, building the house kept moving at full throttle. My two brick-making guys had leveled up their craft in a big way, pumping out 750 bricks yesterday alone, with each new batch turning out better than the last. Talk about true craftsmen, shaping up from folks who didn't even know what a brick was. Just 2 short weeks ago, we pushed the wall height up to nearly 3 meters tall, used up every single dried brick available, and moved onto the roof. Putting up the roof turned out to be a full team effort. The women cut down long, straight tree branches, while the men climbed up high and laid them flat across the tops of the walls to serve as sturdy rafters. After that, the women tied thick grass onto wooden sticks, using woven cord, creating thatched grass mats, which the men then layered onto the roof structure, one section at a time. By late afternoon, the very first house in the history of the Huasha tribe was fully built. 40 square meters of fully enclosed, roofed, and heated living space with a door. A genuine wooden door that could actually shut and latch tight. I stood out front, staring up at this uneven, lopsided, a highly crude structure made of mud bricks. And I swear it looked more breathtaking than any high-rise I had ever laid eyes on. Through my scooter's window back in my old life, the Wu strolled up and jabbed the wall with deep suspicion. Can human beings actually live in this thing? She asked as if I'd set up a booby trap instead of a home. I guided everyone inside to give them the official tour. Over 20 people crammed into the space and found themselves standing in total pitch darkness, bumping into one another while whispering in anxiety. I had some women bring in fire and lit up the indoor hearth. The entire room instantly radiated a warm orange light. Next, I sparked the fire beneath the Kong heating platform, and within just a few minutes, the whole place started warming up like a comfortable cocoon. The entire tribe went completely silent. Not out of fear, mind you, but pure stunned silence as warm air wrapped around folks who had never felt indoor heat before. No harsh wind and no wolves howling in the distance. No freezing rain dripping down on their faces. Just pure warmth and light. Absolute safety and sturdy walls that nothing could tear down. I watched their expressions shift from pure confusion to complete surprise and awe, and finally settle into something that closely resembled true peace. A few of the women gently stroked the walls, as though they couldn't wrap their heads around them being real. Nobody uttered a single word for the longest time. They just stood right there, feeling truly protected, perhaps for the very first time ever. Enclosed by 4 crude mud walls and a thatched roof that I had somehow managed to bring to life, using modern knowledge pulled straight from my previous life. Honestly, it was the best construction review I could ever ask for. A solid 5 stars without saying a single word. Black Bull alongside Black Panther finally returned, looking like they had just ransacked a prehistoric supermarket. They secured 2 living antelopes straight from the trap, a solid 300 pounds of living walking future meals, along with a slain wild boar and a pair of tiny piglets, all thanks to our newly appointed boss. Our food supply went from severe near starvation to actually being pretty manageable in less than a week. I attempted to establish a 3-meal-a-day schedule, just like any proper civilized society. But the Wu shut that idea down instantly. That's way too wasteful, she claimed, glaring at me as if I had suggested. We hurl perfectly good food into the river for fun. All right, fine, 2 meals a day it is. Making compromises is the core foundation of leadership. Even when your right-hand advisor is a 40-year-old shaman who believes eating twice a day is already pure luxury. The real game changer took place that evening, when we put those newly made earthenware pots to use for the first time. The women filled up the massive clay pot with fresh water, tossed in hefty chunks of raw meat, placed the lid on top, and let it simmer over the open flames for an hour. The moment that lid was removed, I witnessed all 27 people completely lose their minds at once. The rich aroma of cooked meat filled the surrounding air, like an explosion of pure, mouth-watering deliciousness. Nostrils were flaring left and right. Grown seasoned warriors were standing around sniffing the air like hungry dogs, waiting right outside a local butcher shop. I could swear one of the primary hunters actually started tearing up, though nobody dared to utter a single word about it. I passed around the pottery dishes, giving one to each person alongside a pair of wooden utensils that I had carved out of twigs, and then I dished out my own portion first. Since in this prehistoric setting, it turns out, the leader always eats ahead of the tribe. It wasn't about flexing authority, it was just custom. The order goes leader first, followed by the fighters, then the women. Next come the kids, and lastly the elders. Might sound harsh, but every single person received the exact same portion size, just served at different times. I made sure nobody was getting ripped off on my watch. And that's when absolute madness broke loose. These folks had literally never laid eyes on chopsticks in their lives, never held a pair of skinny sticks between their fingers, or tried grabbing slick, boiled meat with them. Half the group just snatched the scalding meat with their bare hands, and instantly started shrieking because, big shocker, boiled meat is burning hot. But do you think they dropped it? Nope. They just kept screaming while stuffing their faces. The pain was nothing to them, compared to how insanely delicious that meat was. One guy was straight up blowing on his scorched fingers, while aggressively jamming pork into his mouth. With his other hand, it was equal parts epic and horrifying. A few tried using the chopsticks, and couldn't pick up a single bite. The sticks kept twisting and slipping around, flinging chunks of meat across the room like miniature catapults. A couple of big brains figured out they could just impale the meat with one stick, and eat it like a kebab, which totally missed the point, but honestly showed way more problem-solving skill than I expected. Others straight up surrendered, and poured the meat straight out of their bowls, by tipping the whole dish right against their lips, and letting it slide right in, splashing broth everywhere. The ground looked like a crime scene covered in soup. I laid down the law. Nobody gets to eat unless they use chopsticks, and everyone has to wash their hands before eating. Those are the non-negotiable rules. You'd think I just ordered them to solve high-level calculus. They lined up at the water supply grumbling, washing their hands, probably for the absolute first time in their lives, looking deeply insulted that I was forcing them to touch water before handling their food, but the threat of losing their chopsticks and going without dinner was plenty of motivation. Food is the ultimate leverage in any society, and I was definitely not above abusing that power. Luoshi was sitting right beside me, working on her second bowl with grease all over her chin, looking overwhelmingly cute, and I literally had to force myself to stop staring at her. She'd mastered using chopsticks way faster than anyone else, effortlessly picking up pieces of meat, as if she'd been doing it her entire life. Meanwhile, 3 full-grown dudes behind her were battling over a single chunk of pork, using 6 chopsticks all at once and losing miserably. The absolute best part? This single pot of stew fed all 27 of us, using only the amount of meat that would normally feed 14 people if roasted. That's nearly cutting our food usage in half to get the exact same number of full stomachs. The efficiency was just beautiful. A supply that used to last just 1 day could now stretch to 2, which is massive in a world where winter could easily wipe out your whole clan from pure starvation. I had practically managed to double our food supplies, using nothing more than a single hideous clay pot. The moment the tribe figured this out, they completely lost their minds, leaping into the air and screaming at the top of their lungs, busting out that awful prehistoric dance all over again. I just let them go ahead and party because, honestly, they had actually earned it. That night, every single person crammed into the brand new house, marking the very first time sleeping under a real roof. For every last member of this entire tribe, the Kong platform warmed right up from the fire burning underneath, and the 10 people stretched out on top, which were the elderly, the kids, and the women, were finally warm for the first time in as long as they could remember. The rest of us had to sleep down on the bare floor using animal hides, which definitely sounds miserable, but it was easily 1,000 times better than crashing outside, where wild wolves could rip your face off. Now, I really should bring up one massive problem that almost ruined the whole setup: the sheer stench. Picture 27 human beings who haven't washed themselves a single time in their entire lives, jammed together into one tiny space and piling over each other to sleep. The smell was, well, words fail me. Actually, I do have words for it. It's just that none of them are appropriate to say out loud. Just imagine a sweaty gym locker room placed inside a garbage dump, sitting right in the middle of a baking swamp. My eyes were literally watering, and my nose was trying to detach itself from my face. A lot of these guys hadn't had a drop of water touch their skin since the day they came into this world, and it was painfully obvious in the worst way possible. So there I was, lying in total darkness, surrounded by heavy snoring cavemen, who smelled like they'd been soaking in pure regret for years. And I swore a strict oath right then and there. Tomorrow, every single person bathes. 0 exceptions, 0 arguments. I don't give a damn if the river is freezing cold, or that soap hasn't even been invented yet. We're getting clean. But before that, I had to address the whole bathroom situation, because up until now, whenever nature came calling, people would just wander off into the bushes nearby, pop a squat behind the nearest rock, and take care of business. Which basically meant that the entire perimeter surrounding our home was rapidly turning into a dangerous minefield of human waste. I'd already had a few terrifyingly close calls, just strolling around at night and accidentally stepping on a landmine barefoot, even with my freshly woven grass sandals on, would ruin way more than just my afternoon. It would completely destroy my entire desire to live. Morning rolled around, which meant breakfast. Another round of hot stew and battling with chopsticks. After that, I got right to work on what was easily my least glamorous, yet absolute most vital building project so far, actual toilets. I grabbed 2 of the guys and marched them over to a couple spots right near the shelter, marking 2 big circles right in the dirt. Dig down 1 meter deep, then come find me when you're finished. They looked completely baffled, but immediately started digging without asking a single question. At this stage of the game, nobody ever doubted the bizarre demands I tossed their way. I'd already built up way too much street cred through fire, weapons, cookware, and actual housing, so if I instructed them to dig a random hole, they dug that hole. So while they were out there excavating our future restrooms, I want to check up on how our mud brick situation was coming along. 800 new bricks were crafted yesterday, meaning our little 2-man brick factory was breaking production records right, left, and center. Honestly, these guys totally deserved Employee of the Month, except for the fact that we didn't have months, awards, or actual employees. All they really had was mud and sheer determination, which honestly was close enough. Putting together the restrooms only took a few hours. We built small brick walls around each hole and set up wooden doors. Well, more like wooden slabs swinging on rough rope hinges. But let's be generous and just call them doors. We laid sturdy wooden planks over the pits, leaving a gap right in the middle for business, and topped the whole structure off with a simple roof made of timber and thatch. Now, these weren't exactly luxury 5-star facilities, but they were infinitely better than squatting out in the open behind some random boulder, while constantly looking over your shoulder for wild predators. Next came the big announcement. I called the whole tribe together and laid out the rules. This side is for men, that side is for women. You squat over the opening, do what you gotta do, and then you head out. Simple as that. Hearing this, the women turned bright red, and I don't mean a soft pink. I mean full-blown tomato red. They were absolutely mortified that their chief was standing right in front of them, explaining basic bathroom etiquette, like he was a preschool teacher. One woman literally buried her face in both hands, while another turned completely around, just to avoid making eye contact with me. During this awkward toilet crash course, the guys, as you'd expect, didn't give a single care, and just nodded along with blank, clueless expressions. To make sure nobody accidentally wandered into the wrong side, I planted a tall wooden post right outside the men's room to serve as a clear landmark. Then, knowing these villagers needed some serious motivation to follow orders, I laid down a penalty for using the wrong stall. 2 entire days without a single bite of food. Instantly, the color drained from every single person's face. Going 2 full days without eating was their absolute worst nightmare. Scarier than wild beasts, scarier than enemy tribes, and far worse than any punishment I could ever threaten them with. One elderly woman squinted at that wooden marker post so hard, I seriously thought her eyes were going to pop right out, desperately engraving its exact location into her mind, so she'd never accidentally walk into the wrong doorway. Pretty soon, people started pointing back and forth between the stalls, testing each other on the rules to ensure nobody would end up being the person who caused the tribe's very first toilet-related starvation, while everyone was busy committing restroom locations to memory, like their lives literally depended on it, which, as far as their stomach were concerned, they kind of did. I strolled over to the clay trench, where the women had been excavating dirt for our brick supply. The pit had grown pretty deep by now, which sparked a brilliant idea in my head. Once all the houses were done, I could flood this ditch with water and fill it up with fish. A custom fish pond sitting right outside our front doors. Craving fresh seafood for dinner? Just walk 20 steps, scoop one right out, and boom, you're set. No more spending hours standing in freezing river currents, trying to spear slippery fish by hand. It was literally the Stone Age equivalent of having a fridge, fully stocked with fresh groceries. On top of that, I dispatched Black Bull and Black Panther to set up 2 extra pitfall traps right near some other water holes. My mindset was pretty straightforward. The more traps snagging game while we sleep, the fewer guys actually have to risk their necks hunting each day. Honestly, every single trap was like a tiny safety net keeping starvation at bay. Eventually, between these traps, our goat ranch, the fish pond, and active hunting, we'd stack up so many food sources. that not even a brutal winter could starve us out. That crude wooden fence we threw together on day one, I had it converted into a legitimate livestock pen. Now, 3 goats and 2 antelopes were staying in there, happily munching on fresh grass the kids gathered every day. Our little farm stash was definitely expanding. The goats' injuries had patched up nicely, and they seemed totally fine just hanging out, enjoying a free buffet, rather than running for their lives out in the wild. To be real, they actually had it better than most of us. Later that night, I kicked back on the dirt floor of our new mud house, surrounded by tribe members who were slightly less filthy, and actually using latrines and eating with chopsticks now. As I listened to the soft snoring and the gentle crackle of the fire, I started mapping out my plan for tomorrow. Build a bathhouse, enforce strict basic hygiene, maybe hunt down some wild veggies for our stew, break ground on the next house, double-check the pit traps, and keep that brick production grinding nonstop. Think about it. This tribe went from homeless, starving, and fireless refugees to running a fenced settlement with real houses, working toilets, pottery, tamed livestock, a steady supply of food, deadly bows, and structured night guard shifts. And we pulled all this off in under 2 weeks. Seriously, not bad for a former delivery guy. By that afternoon, I managed to construct 2 separate bathhouses, one designated for men and the other for women. I stuck a wooden post right in front of the guy's side, sticking to the exact same system we used for the toilets. Bit by bit, my tribe was transforming into the most organized group of cavemen in all of prehistoric history. We had dedicated restrooms, private bathing stalls, and a visual sign system, just to keep people from accidentally wandering into the wrong stall. Somewhere way off in the future, a modern health inspector would be shedding a tear of joy. Okay, maybe not really, but compared to just last week, when everybody was literally taking a leak behind the nearest boulder, we were practically operating a 5-star resort out here. Right around sundown, Black Bull and Black Panther made their return, hauling in enough fresh meat to feed a whole military unit. 2 wild sheep snagged in a single trap, one still breathing, the other dead. Along with a massive 200-pound boar they managed to drop with arrows. Granted, taking down that boar took a whopping 20 arrows, which probably sounds like terrible aim on paper, until you remember that these dudes literally picked up a bow for the first time 2 days ago. Prior to that, their whole idea of long-range warfare was chucking heavy rocks and praying it hits something. So honestly, landing 20 arrows on a charging boar is elite sniper energy, by caveman standards. And those sharp stone arrowheads I had attached the night before, they completely turned the tide. Standard bamboo shafts just ricochet off tough boar hide like flimsy wooden splinters, but arrows tipped with stone slice clean through those razor-sharp little mineral shards instantly upgraded our basic practice bows into deadly hunting weapons. Black Bull couldn't hide his massive grin, looking just like a kid who'd scored a stash of sweet treats, while Black Panther couldn't stop gushing over the way the wild hog squealed, ran around frantically, and finally collapsed, simply because it had so many arrow shafts protruding from its body that it ended up resembling a porcupine's pissed-off relative. I checked in on how many pit traps they had set up. Turns out it was 3 brand new ones along with our original setup, which meant we now had 4 active pits, operating simultaneously across various animal tracks. Right near the water sources, basically 4 automated game capturing systems, putting in work 24/7 even while we were fast asleep, meaning every single morning brought a pretty solid chance that our evening meal had literally caught itself overnight. This was the exact vision I had in mind, a sustainable food setup that didn't force anyone to risk getting impaled by a wild boar or torn apart by some dangerous beast. The more traps we had up and running, the less reason anybody had to play the reckless hero. We pinned up the surviving sheep, patched up its injuries, carved up the game we took down, packed away the surplus meat for the following day, and gathered indoors to finally grab dinner. The simmering stew pot was sending out mouth-watering waves of rich scent, drifting all throughout the shelter, and everyone stuffed themselves until they literally couldn't move. The tribe had been getting full, steady meals for days straight now, and the physical transformation was undeniable. The guys are filling out, building real muscle mass, and walking with confidence. Heck, even the women looked way healthier, with their sunken cheeks finally filling back in. The little kids who were totally skin and bones and quiet when I first showed up were now running around full of actual life and energy, making noise and being rowdy like normal kids are supposed to be. It was an awesome sight to see. Then I took Black Bull and Black Panther over to break down the bathhouse setup, laid out how the latrine worked, and watched their expressions shift from complete confusion to slight disgust, and finally to hesitant agreement. Just another day. And another weird mandate from their teenage leader, who kept demanding things like basic cleanliness and refusing to live in complete filth. They probably thought I was totally out of my mind. But hey, the food kept rolling in and the wolves kept taking a less. So nobody voiced any complaints, and as night fell, I organized the night watch schedule before everyone turned in. The heated floor was warm, the clay walls were sturdy. Every stomach was full, and for the first time in a long while, the clan actually felt completely secure. I even allowed myself to drop my guard bit as I slowly drifted off to sleep. And that was my big mistake, because in the dead of night, while the entire tribe was completely knocked out, sleeping peacefully inside our snug mud shelter, 20 pairs of glowing red eyes emerged right out of the shadows. The White Wolf King had returned, and this time it brought its entire pack along. This was no random opportunistic predator attack. This was straight payback, a fully tactical maneuver. And completely personal, the Wolf King divided its pack, just like a seasoned military strategist, sending 3 wolves to strike the livestock enclosure first, as they leaped right over the wooden barricade and drove their fangs right into our animals, before any of them could even utter a squeal. By the time the sheep began gushing blood, those wolves were already tearing them to shreds. Blood splatter covered the entire pen. Even the antelope we had tirelessly nursed back to life had its throat ripped open in a split second. Our modest homestead and my grand vision of self-sufficiency were getting completely destroyed right before my eyes. To make matters worse, the Wolf King personally led a pack of 20 straight toward our shelter, completely encircling the place and relentlessly gnawing at the mud walls, as if they were trying to chew straight through solid earth. The sound of all that scratching and biting was pure nightmare fuel. Just picture 20 pairs of sharp fangs grinding against hardened clay, just inches away from where you're sleeping on the floor. Black Bull happened to be on night watch. When he picked up the crunching noises outside, he pressed his face against the lookout slit and almost died of sheer terror. There were beasts everywhere. A massive sea of glowing red eyes reflected the flickering firelight. He shrieked at the top of his lungs for everyone to wake up. I went instantly from deep sleep to full survival mode in literally less than a second. Before my brain could even fully process what was happening, my hands had automatically grabbed my bow and notched an arrow, and every guy in the room did the exact same thing. All that muscle memory from our grueling training kicked in instantly. The women snatched up stone spears and formed a defensive line at the entrance, their hands shaking and faces completely drained of color. 20 wild wolves could easily turn this room into a bloody slaughterhouse the second they managed to breach the perimeter. But here's the catch that the Wolf King didn't realize. The last time we threw down, all we had were crude sticks, sharpened wooden spears, and pure desperation. This time around, we were armed with bows, and the Wolf King had zero concept of what a bow even was. I stationed 4 marksmen at each of the lookout windows, 2 firing while 2 reloaded, rotating seamlessly back and forth, ensuring there was never a single pause in our barrage. 8 archers in total, maintaining a relentless stream of suppressive fire from both flanks. I took my position at the right window and barked out the exact command we had practiced dozens of times. As the beast charged forward, I yelled, "Fire!" 4 deadly shafts unleashed from both windows at the exact same moment. The sound of those arrows slicing through the night sky, that sharp, lethal whistling air, was honestly the most satisfying thing I had ever heard in my entire life. 4 wolves collapsed dead on spot, with wooden arrows driven deep into their flesh, dark blood rapidly pooling beneath their bodies. They hadn't even made it close to the building yet. The entire pack ground to a screeching halt, utterly baffled by what had just hit them. Where did that attack even come from? There was literally nothing to see. No human charging out into the open. No visible spear flying through the air. Just unseen, silent death, hissing right out of tiny slits in the wall. And before their brain-dead pack could comprehend the situation, our second round of fire was already flying through the air. 2 more beasts hit the dirt, howling in agony. One tried to dodge out of the way, only to catch a projectile right in its hindquarters, spinning wildly in circles and letting out painful shrieks. Infuriated, the Wolf King let out a deafening roar and ordered a full-blown desperate charge straight for the entrance. The surviving wolves launched themselves at the wooden entrance, biting, clawing, and bashing their bodies against it. Inside, the women were standing side by side, aiming their spears right at the rattling door. each and every one of them shaking so violently that their weapons clattered. If that door gave way, this whole story would have ended very differently. Luckily, we had carved out holes in the door, actual peepholes, and now arrows came flying out through them. At point-blank range, those wolves were literally pressing their snouts up against the door, when stone-tipped arrows pierced straight through and struck them down. 3 more dropped dead right on the spot, bleeding out right on our doorstep. The Wolf King froze in shock. In its entire life, it had never witnessed anything like this before. Every single battle had ever fought followed the exact same code: rush in, bite down, overpower, and win. That's just how wolves operate. And honestly, that's how the entire animal kingdom works. Yet this structure, this hideously ugly brown box crafted from mud and grass, was striking back from the inside, without ever even opening its doors. It was basically like trying to devour a turtle that could literally shoot lightning. The Wolf King just stood there paralyzed for several seconds, its brilliant predator instinct desperately trying to process a situation that logically shouldn't exist. But it couldn't. The math just wasn't mathing. Way too many dead wolves, no visible enemy to attack, and deadly arrows striking them down from impossible distances. The Wolf King let out one last bitter howl and sounded the retreat. The second those glowing red eyes faded back into the dark, I finally exhaled a breath I'd been holding for so long that my lungs were practically burning. The women lowered their spears and slouched against the walls in sheer exhaustion. One of our hunters sank to the floor and buried his head between his knees, while someone was weeping softly in the corner, and absolutely nobody blamed them for it. We unbolted the door to find 9 dead wolves, and an entryway completely soaked in blood. The guy stepped outside and put an end to the ones that were still twitching. 9 kills and 0 losses on our side. Not a single scratch on anyone. The archer's setup had literally transformed our hideous little shelter into an unbreachable stronghold. I felt a profound shift inside me. Not pride, exactly, but absolute conviction. We could make it here. We could actually hold our ground. We weren't the prey anymore. Then I went over to inspect the livestock enclosure, and my stomach dropped straight into my grass sandals. Half of our 6 animals were dead, brutally mauled. The 2 lamb chicks and a wild antelope had been shredded to pieces by the wolves, who had targeted the pen. While we were fully distracted defending the main house, splatters of blood, tufts of fur, and gruesome remains were strewn all over the dirt. My entire animal breeding plan, my dream of building a farm instead of constantly hunting, had been completely butchered overnight. I stood there completely frozen, staring right at the total destruction, and felt genuine heartbreak, not just frustration over a lost plan. It was pure sorrow, because those animals were our future. Each goat that bred meant another month of guaranteed food, and every sheep meant 1 fewer life-threatening hunt. Yet now, half of our livestock was gone, all because I failed to secure the enclosure properly. The Wolf King had completely outsmarted me, striking right at our vulnerability, while all our defenders were distracted elsewhere. A masterclass in military tactics, pulled off by a wild beast. I'd been totally outmaneuvered by an animal, and 3 of my precious livestock paid the ultimate price. So we hauled the dead animals back, skinned them, carved up the meat, and smoked every last piece over the fire, turning it into jerky to store for later. You simply can't afford to waste meat out here, even if it used to be your prized passion project. As for the 3 surviving animals, they huddled together in the corner of the pen, completely traumatized, and honestly, I knew exactly how they felt. By the time we wrapped up processing all the meat, morning had already arrived, meaning 0 rest for any of us. Breakfast was a bowl of wolf stew, sour and extremely gamey. But hey, energy is energy, and complaining was a privilege we couldn't dream of having. After that, it was straight back to the grind. The brickmaking crew had gone into absolute overdrive, cranking out 1,300 bricks yesterday, and with the whole tribe lending a hand today, we managed to churn out 2,000 by midday. 2,000 bricks in just half a day. This exact same tribe that couldn't even feed itself 2 weeks ago was now mass-producing building materials, operating like a mini-industrial powerhouse. The women hauled clay, the elders gathered grass. The men mixed and shaped, while kids ran back and forth carrying supplies. Over 20 people operating in seamless sync, just like a well-oiled machine made of mud. And mud-caked villagers. Meanwhile, Black Bull and Black Panther headed out to inspect the 4 pit traps and returned carrying 2 more wild boars. Those traps were performing like clockwork. Food was basically serving itself directly to us. Every single morning, combining the traps, our hunting bows, and the big stew pot. We were making our rations stretch twice as far. We had a more reliable food supply than this tribe had ever seen in its entire history. That afternoon, I kicked off work on the second house, sticking to the same design, mud walls, a thatched roof, a heated Kong bed with a chimney, lookout windows, and a sturdy wooden door. Armed with 2,000 bricks and the whole team working together, those walls shot up in no time. And by the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, yet another structure was already taking shape. After dinner, I sat outside staring into the campfire, reflecting on the brutal lesson the Wolf King had just handed me. The livestock pen needed solid brick walls. A simple wooden fence just wasn't cutting it. The houses had to be built closer together, so we could easily cover one another with bow fire. We needed additional traps, expanded food storage, more of everything. It felt like every time I fixed one issue, 3 brand new problems popped up in its place. But here's the thought that kept me going. Everyone was fed today, everyone was warm, and every single person was alive. Just 2 weeks ago, this tribe was completely homeless and starving to death. Unarmed, sprinting away from wild beasts and hostile warriors, armed with nothing but wooden clubs, in pure panic. Yet here we were with real shelter. Ceramics, hunting bows, snaring equipment, farm animals, hot meals, restrooms, bathhouses, and an assembly line churning out 2,000 bricks. Before midday, not too shabby, for a clan named after an empire that wouldn't even exist for thousands of years. Those 2 wild boars we snagged were pretty beat up, so I patched up their wounds with animal skins and threw them into the enclosure with the remaining sheep. My livestock count was looking pretty sad after that brutal wolf attack. But hey, a couple of banged-up pigs beat having 0 pigs any day. My mindset was straightforward. If it breathes, and it's meat, keep it breathing until winter tries to wipe us out, and only then do we feast. Now, with the wolf raid, leaving us a massive pile of fresh meat, and a desperate urge to never get caught off guard again, I put the whole damn tribe on brick-making duty. Every single soul, no passes given. We pumped out 4,000 bricks in a single day. Toss in yesterday's 1,200, and we were sitting on 5,200 ready to build. A standard house took around 3,000, so we were practically drowning in materials. The 2 dudes I originally trained to make bricks were straight-up master masons at this point, and with over 20 people helping out, our little mud operation was running like a full-blown industrial factory. That night, something went down. That slapped me with a harsh reality check on just how wild primitive life actually is compared to the modern world. Everyone was turning in for the night in our shared longhouse. 27 people crammed together on the dirt floor and the heated brick platform, when suddenly I started hearing noises. Very specific, unmistakable noises. The crystal-clear audio of 2 adults who decided bedtime was the prime moment to make another human being, right there in the middle of a packed room. And nobody batted an eye, not a single person. The rest of the tribe just laid there, treating it like ambient background noise, as completely ordinary as crickets outside. Because in the Stone Age, making babies isn't some private matter. It's pure survival. More kids mean more manpower, which means a better shot at not dying off. There's 0 concept of privacy. No scam, no shouting. Get a room. Because everyone literally lives in the exact same room. As for me, I was lying there with my 21st century mindset, having a full-blown existential crisis. Cringing so hard my toes could have dug straight through the ground. I wanted to vanish. I wanted to erase my memory entirely. I missed delivering food delivery orders, where the most awkward situation I ever hit was a customer opening the door in their boxers. And then a terrifying thought hit me like a ton of bricks. What if a guy tried pulling that move on Luo? Sure. In this primitive society, relationship boundaries simply didn't exist. No marriage, no dating, nothing like that. 0 exclusivity. Only the chief had 1 dedicated partner, while everyone else basically operated on a free-for-all basis. Kids rarely even had a clue who their actual father was. So just the thought of another guy touching Luo sure made my blood boil so hard that I felt like I could bake pottery with my bare hands. I instantly stood up and marched right over to where Luo sure was lying wide awake, because seriously, how could she not be? Who could possibly sleep through that background noise? I lay down right beside her, my heart pounding so furiously that I was convinced the whole tribe could hear it beating, even over all the wild action going on in the room. Luo sure instantly went stiff as a board. I could literally feel the sheer tension radiating off her body. But look, I had 0 game. No smooth pickup lines, no strategic romance plan at all. I just outright blurted, "Luo sure, Can you promise me you won't do stuff like that with any other guy? Only with me. What followed were the longest 3 seconds of my life, until she softly whispered, just a single sound. It was easily the sweetest sound in human history. She said yes, and my heart instantly exploded into like 10,000 pieces of pure, unadulterated joy. I reached out and grabbed her hand. She squeezed back, and we eventually drifted off to sleep right like that. Our fingers tightly locked together. Just two 14-year-olds in a mud hut surrounded by snoring cavemen. All while the lovely ambient sounds of prehistoric mating calls kept blasting in the background. Right then and there, I made a personal call. I was going to wait until we were both 16 before making any real moves. Hey, even a delivery guy has standards, even back in the Stone Age. The next few weeks were absolute construction chaos. House after house went up, using the exact same blueprint every time. Because hey, why mess with something that works? 4 corner houses for the guards, 1 massive central house for myself, plus 2 restrooms and 2 bathhouses. The entire compound was finally coming together like an actual proper town, rather than some makeshift survival camp. Having guard posts stationed at every corner meant we had eyes watching every single angle 24/7, and putting my house right in the middle gave me a direct line of sight and communication with all of them. It was basic military design at its core, and honestly, it made me feel like at least 10% less likely to get slaughtered in my sleep. Then it was time for the grand finale. A massive city wall, 3 meters high and 1.5 meters thick, stretching all the way around the entire perimeter. This wasn't just some flimsy wooden fence or random barrier. We were talking about a full-on legitimate defense fortress that nothing could jump over, smash through, or scale. Not wild wolves, not hostile tribes, not even a giant tiger. The only way inside would be right through the main gate. And good luck pulling that off when you've got archers posted on top of a 10-foot wall, raining down an absolute storm of arrows on your head. To speed things up, I built 2 simple cranes using basic mechanical levers. Just wooden structures, designed to haul heavy bricks straight up to the builders on the wall. Granted, each crane could only lift 1 or 2 bricks at a time, and every single brick came in at roughly 15 pounds, which was honestly a whole lot. Better than having guys haul them up ladders all day long. The tribe was staring at these cranes like I just cracked the code to magic. Though honestly by now, they weren't even shocked by my creations anymore. Instead, they had entered this state of constant, low-key awe, kind of like living alongside a sorcerer who just keeps pulling wilder and wilder tricks out his hat. Bit by bit, the wall kept rising. First 100 meters, then 200. The whole perimeter was aiming for around 800 to 900 meters total. 4 massive sides, roughly 200 meters each, safely wrapping around every single home, with plenty of extra space left over for future farming. I even mixed grass, tiny pebbles, and would ash into the clay so the bricks could shrug off heavy rain. Once they fully cured, these bad boys were tough enough to withstand conditions that would normally melt ordinary mud back into the dirt it came from. In the meantime, I decided to whip up a brand new gadget. The sling, a simple little leather pouch attached to 2 cords, capable of hurling a rock at a target, hard enough to knock it cold without killing it. This was a total game changer because dead game goes bad real fast, whereas a knocked out animal can be dragged back to camp and tossed right into our livestock pen. And man, our ranching operation was absolutely thriving. We had over 30 sheep and more than a dozen wild pigs currently hanging out inside our walls, happily munching on fresh grass the kids gathered every single day. Every single beast in that pen represented a future meal that didn't require anyone to put their life on the line. Out on a dangerous hunt, I just stand by the enclosure, gazing at my growing flock of chubby, prehistoric livestock, grinning like an absolute lunatic, going from absolute zero to a fully functional farm in under a month? Yeah, take that. Wolf King. But it wasn't just our setup. The tribe members were physically transforming too. Weeks of eating steady, cooked stews twice a day, packed with meat, rich broth, and whatever edible plants we could forage, had turned my walking skeletons into actual, healthy human beings. The men were actually building muscle now, real muscle, not just skin stretched over bare bone. Their arms were visibly thicker, their actions far more powerful, and their whole demeanor was night and day compared to the terrified, starving wrecks I'd first taken charge of. Even the women had filled out, looking strong and full of life, rather than looking like they were one skipped meal away from collapsing. Everyone's complexion looked so much better. Their energy was through the roof, and the overall mood had completely flipped from Please just let us survive today. Straight to, all right, boss, what are we building next? To keep things efficient, I divided our hunters into 2 4-man squads. Squad 1 was led by Black Bull, while I took charge of Squad 2, keeping Black Panther as my second in command. While one group was out hunting, the other stayed back to work on the walls. This rotation system kept everyone sharp and motivated. Nobody burned out on construction, knowing that by tomorrow they'd be out in the wild tracking boars. And no one got exhausted from hunting either, since they'd be back laying bricks the next day. It was basically the world's very first shift work system. And man, did it run like a charm. So one afternoon, while half of our guys were out on a hunt, and the rest of us were up on the wall laying down bricks, I caught movement right at the edge of our territory. Shadows, distinctly human-shaped shadows. Around 15 of them, sneaking through the tall grass, trying to play it cool, while very obviously checking out our base. Wild men. Nomadic savages packing stone spears and starving eyes. The exact kind of people who roamed the prehistoric world, snatching whatever they wanted, from anyone too weak to stop them. They'd been tracking game for days, with absolutely nothing to show for it. Their gear was total trash. Their skills were even worse, and they couldn't land a single catch. In a valley overflowing with wildlife. And then they spotted our livestock pen. 30 sheep and a dozen pigs just standing there, plump and completely helpless behind a fence. Their eyes instantly lit up like they'd just hit the jackpot. Next, they did a head count on us. For visible men, plus a few women and kids. Easy targets. A tiny tribe sitting on way more food than it could ever defend. They had zero clue what they were actually walking into. No idea about our bows, no idea about the wall. And no idea that the skinny kid, caked in mud atop the half-built fortification, had already slaughtered wolves, outsmarted a wolf king, and transformed a dying tribe into the single most heavily armed settlement in the entire valley. I watched them sizing us up, and I just smirked. Come on over, boys. Class is now in session. So there I was, perched on our half-finished wall covered in mud, feeling pretty good about how things were going, when a dozen random strangers decided today was the perfect day to ruin my life. Their leader gave some kind of pep talk to his crew. I couldn't make out the words from where I stood, but I bet it went something like, check out those idiots playing in the dirt. Let's go rob them blind. And then they rushed us with rocks. They started pelting us with actual fist-sized rocks, hurling them straight at our faces. One slammed into the dirt right in front of me, and it suddenly hit me. In the Stone Age, taking a boulder to the skull is pretty much an instant death sentence. No pedimodix. Just game over permanently. My battle instincts, which I'd forged over the last few weeks, by fighting off packs of wolves. A sentence I never in my life thought I'd say. Kicked in instantly. Everyone get inside. Now, the women and kids sprinted for the huts like their lives depended on it, because they 100% did. My 2 squad members moved fast as well, drawing their bows and firing on the move. But one of my guys took a heavy stone straight to the shoulder. I heard the sickening crack before his scream even hit. Fractured shoulder blade. He collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. I grabbed him by his good arm and hauled him toward the safety of the house, while arrows zipped right over our heads, flying back and forth. Black Panther and the squad were pulling back, returning fire on the run, which looks awesome in action flicks, but is actually terrifying when you're live on the scene. With rocks hurled right at your head, we rushed inside, slammed the door, and assessed the situation. One of our guys hurt, 2 of theirs down outside, riddled with arrows. Screaming and bleeding out. Round 1 was pretty much a tie. Here's the real kicker. These wild savages had zero clue about our structures. They weren't just simple huts. They were straight-up bunkers with mud walls thick enough to absorb a stone hit, custom firing slits, tailor-made for picking off targets with arrows, and a reinforced door built to hold off wolf packs. These idiots thought they were raiding a basic camp, when they were actually storming an impenetrable fortress, held by the only trained marksmen in existence. 8 of them rallied and made a desperate charge with stone spears, howling like absolute lunatics. Textbook primitive tactics. Splint fast, scream loud. Stab with sharp stick. Scary stuff if you've never faced a bow before. A lot less scary when a volley of arrows zip right out of a tiny opening and instantly drop 2 of your boys into the dirt, with bamboo shafts driven deep into their chests. We stepped outside a risky play maybe, but I quickly spotted 8 hostile targets, 6 already bleeding out, and only 2 still able to fight. Meanwhile, we had 4 bowmen with loaded quivers, plus the massive mental advantage of having just turned their attack squad into human pincushions. Another volley, 2 more down. Their leader, a massive brute, and clearly a battle-hardened veteran, pulled off something insane. He swung his stone spear and deflected 2 incoming arrows right out of the air. Mid-flight, I almost gave him props for that almost. The 2 goons standing beside him weren't nearly as skilled, and 8 arrows straight to the gut. Blood spurted everywhere as they hit the dirt. Super dramatic, super brutal. Now 10 raiders were either dead or out of commission, leaving just 2 guys left, completely surrounded by archers, who could reload way faster than they could even throw a stone. The tactical math was brutal. You can throw a stone maybe 40 meters once. An arrow travels 80 meters, and I can lose 5 or 6 shots before you even reach for a second rock. It's not even a fair fight. It's literally bringing a water balloon to a gunfight. I yelled at the final 2 survivors to drop their gear and hit the deck. They froze up, so I barked again, still paralyzed with their legs visibly shaking. I could literally see them trembling from 20 meters off. The third time I injected full lethal intent into my voice, and they finally dumped their spears and slammed face first onto the ground. Smart move, a bit late, but smart. We cuffed them up immediately. And this is where my modern intellect really kicked in. I basically invented POW protocol right then and there. I bound every single pair of prisoners together by their ankles, locking 2 men to a single rope so that if one tried to bolt, his partner was forced to run in the exact same direction, matching his pace step for step. Otherwise, they'd both take a hard dive right into the dirt. Good luck trying to make a high-speed break for freedom when your left foot is legally bound for life, too. Some other guy's right foot, it's just not happening. The Wu members stared at me like I was some kind of mastermind villain. The rest of the tribe looked half impressed and low-key terrified by how effortlessly I engineered such cruel and unusual ways to bind people. But here's where I drew the line between a ruthless barbarian, chieftain, and a civilized human being. I spare their lives. Literally any other clan in this ruthless world would have executed every single one of them on the spot, or at the very least left the injured to bleed out where they lay. Instead, I ordered the Wu to tend to their wounds, sanitize the gashes, apply Sanji medicinal powder, and wrap them all up in clean bandages. 2 of the guys who took heavy blows to the gut were looking extremely rough, and honestly, I wasn't betting on them making it through the night. Still, I handed them a fighting chance, which is way more mercy than they ever would have shown us. Why go on my way to save them? Simple. Dead enemies are useless corpses. Living enemies, however, mean free labor. These 10 captives, well, 8, assuming the guys with gut wounds didn't kick the bucket, were about to be inducted as the newest hires of Huaisha Construction Enterprise. Unpaid recruits pulling 12-hour shifts building my defense wall, surviving on half rations, keeping them just malnourished enough to not start a rebellion, yet energetic enough to keep stacking heavy stone blocks. Was this total forced labor? Absolutely. Did I feel 100% great about it? Not entirely, no. But was there a better alternative in a lawless wilderness, devoid of prisons, legal systems, or courtrooms, where you couldn't just send hostiles home with a stern warning? Fentanyl. These savages launched an attack to murder us all, plunder our supplies, and enslave our women and farm animals. The mere fact that they were breathing was pure act of grace, and the fact that they were now forced to build the very wall, designed to keep the next wave of raiders out. Well, that's poetic Stone Age justice right there. Later that afternoon, when Black Bull's Squad 1 finally marched back, only to find fresh blood spatters coating the ground, and 10 hogtied invaders slumped right in the middle of our village. They almost lost their damn minds. Once I broke down the chaos for them, Black Bull's expression rotated through like 7 distinct emotions. In a span of 3 short seconds, total shock, immense relief, pure fury, bursting pride, a fresh wave of rage, reluctant respect, and ultimately, something approaching genuine reverence. His unit had been out tracking game all day long, returning with 10 live sheep and 5 wild boars, snared by our sling traps, a haul that on any ordinary afternoon would have been celebrated as breaking news. Yet today, it barely qualified as a footnote. Oh, sweet. More livestock. By the way, we got ambushed, and I captured an entire hostile 4 solo while you guys were out. Now pass me that meat stew. That night, the entire settlement was buzzing with hype over the big news. Our livestock ranching operation had officially gone massive, boasting over 30 sheep, more than a dozen pigs, and rapidly multiplying. Now for the bad news. 2 of our captives ended up succumbing to their injuries during the night. Severe abdominal puncture wounds. In an era completely lacking antibiotics or surgical tools, there was nothing I could do, leaving us with just 8 prisoners. Fortunately, 6 of them were recovering quickly enough, but they'd be back to hauling bricks in just a few days. However, the leader of the raiding party wouldn't stop glaring at me, his eyes filled with pure hatred. So I straight up kicked him over like a cheap lawn chair. Yeah, not exactly my proudest moment, but when a guy who literally just tried to slaughter your family gives you the death stare, you don't exactly give him a motivational speech. I immediately put the 2 unharmed captives to work, assigning them to dig up clay for brickmaking, while the lightly injured were tasked with grinding down stones to craft sharp arrowheads and spearheads. As for the severely wounded ones, they were locked in a room to recover on their own. Now everyone got fed, but the prisoners only received half rations. You see, full stomachs give people energy, and energy gives prisoners dangerous ideas. Specifically, bad ideas like escaping. Half-starved prisoners who can barely walk aren't going to launch an uprising. Was it harsh? Absolutely. But was it 100% necessary? You bet. This severe lack of manpower forced my hand on an idea I had been mulling over for quite some time. Forming an all-women combat unit, with prisoners to keep an eye on, fortifications to build, and hunting trips to run, all while having only 8 adult men, including myself. We simply didn't have enough hands on deck. So, I handpicked 6 of the largest, strongest women in the tribe to establish Squad 3. Trust me, these weren't fragile, delicate women. These ladies were built like NFL defensive linemen, having spent weeks hauling heavy logs and stomping mud. The largest among them, a woman everyone referred to as Flower Queen, stood almost as tall as Black Bull himself, and looked strong enough to bench press an entire goat. I appointed her as the squad leader right on the spot. I then assigned Black Panther to train them in marksmanship, sling shooting, spear tactics, hand-to-hand combat, and endurance running, putting them through the rigorous military program I had developed over the past month. And these women threw themselves into the training, as if their very lives depended on it, which, considering what we had just been through, they absolutely did. Within just a few days, they were drilling with a level of focus and fierce determination that put some of the men to complete shame. At this point, the Washia tribe boasted 3 functional combat squads, a working livestock ranch, a forced labor unit, a half-finished defensive perimeter, 5 sturdy houses, fully operational latrines and bath facilities, crafted pottery, cooked meals, an arsenal of bows and slings, and a population of 31 free villagers. Alongside 8 captives, we had transformed from a group of starving refugees, cowering in a dark cave, into a legitimate settlement featuring a structured military, a functional economy, and established territorial dominance. And all of this happened in roughly a month. And why? All because a simple delivery guy tumbled off a cliff, fractured his skull, and woke up in the complete wrong century. Later that evening, I conducted an interrogation on the captured leader, demanding to know the location of his main tribe, their motive for attacking us, and what they were doing trespassing on our territory in the first place. These answers were about to reveal if we were dealing with just a few desperate, wandering hunters, or a scout team sent by a massive and far more lethal force. Either way, I had to get my defense wall built faster, way faster. So, I grilled the chief of these new captives, and his tale was utterly cliché. They belonged to the Stone Tribe, named with sheer genius, mind you, simply because their camp sat next to a pile of rocks. A real creative bunch. They'd been roaming around for 3 whole days without taking down a single beast, since their arsenal was literally sharp stones, tied to wooden sticks, and they were starving. That's when they stumbled upon our farm, packed with juicy sheep and plump hogs. They spotted only 4 guys guarding the place, and their desperate minds reacted logically or not. They threw logic out the window and immediately decided, hey, let's raid them, 10 against 4. Simple arithmetic, right? Well, they completely overlooked the minor detail. That 4 guys with bows easily outmatched 40 guys with rocks. Just one volley, and 8 of them ended up on the dirt, bleeding out. Hands down the worst ambush in prehistoric history. Their leader actually had the audacity to beg for freedom, swearing they would never cross us again. Oh, sure, pal. You literally tried to slaughter my crew and swipe my livestock. And now I'm supposed to just wave goodbye. And take your word for it, I come from the 21st century. I've binge-watched enough true crime to know that's a guaranteed way to get knifed in your sleep 2 weeks down the road. He also accidentally leaked that his clan still had 40 members back at their base. 20 men, 15 women, and 5 kids, 20 adult males. That specific number lodged in my head like a thorn. If their chief didn't return anytime soon, those 20 warriors would come hunting for him. And unlike this pathetic scout group I just crushed, they'd show up fully armed and out for blood. Pile that on top of the ongoing wolf tribe threat. Over 100 fighters who already wanted our heads on a spike. And suddenly, my little haven felt significantly less safe. The captives were immediately put to work on the perimeter wall. 8 unpaid workers, who survived on half rations and had zero say in anything. The jump in construction speed was instant. My wall project had been dragging along painfully slow, when it was just our tiny crew grinding out all the manual labor. However, now, with extra manpower stacking stone bricks and hauling clay, entire sections were shooting up dramatically faster. We had 200 meters of wall fully built, which sounds great until you consider the fact that I still needed 800 or 900 total. Even so, progress was progress, and every additional meter of barrier standing between us and the dangers outside helped me sleep just a bit easier at night. Still, that clash with the stone tribe taught me a crucial lesson, an oversight that almost cost us everything. Our firepower was incredible. Bows gave us lethal offensive power that no other local tribe could hope to rival. Yet our defensive capabilities were flat out laughable. A single well-aimed stone had shattered my man's shoulder blade and nearly put him out of commission permanently. We were so hyper-focused on sniping enemies that I completely spaced on preventing ourselves from taking damage. A total rookie mistake. Basically like building a high-speed sports car with no brakes. The solution hit me instantly once I actually sat down to think about it. Shields. Massive wooden shields, reinforced with thick animal hides that could stop a thrown rock, or easily deflect an incoming spear strike. Forging legitimate metal armor wasn't an option. There was zero metal or iron or anywhere in this flat river basin, and woven rattan gear would have been awesome, except for the fact that rattan barely even grew across these vast plains. So shields it was. Every squad now operated in duo pairs. 2 archers raining down heavy range fire, and 2 shield and spear troops holding down close-quarters defense. Offense meets defense, shoot and block. It was literally the most fundamental, tactical military setup in human history, and it worked like a total charm. The moment the squads started running combined drills. Speaking of training, I went full drill sergeant mode on everyone. 3 squads grinding nonstop daily, running high-intensity combat simulations against each other, using padded wooden practice, spears padded with thick hide, making sure no one accidentally kicked the bucket during sparring. 2 squads would clash head-on, while the 3rd squad analyzed their attack angles, defensive, wall formations, tactical retreats, and flank maneuvers. Basically tactical knowledge I'd soaked up from war flicks and history books. Back in my previous life, all tailored for a group whose entire military doctrine used to be charge straight ahead, screaming at the top of your lungs, and pray for victory. Meanwhile, the tribe's elders set up their own production line, as I had them mass-producing clay pottery, sturdy shields, arrows, and bowstrings around the clock. Old Bear and his veteran crew had practically transformed into a full-fledged arms factory. Slow, aching with arthritis, and running on nothing but leftover stew, yet remarkably consistent as our stockpile expanded day by day. With every passing day, our tribe was becoming exponentially more lethal. Winter was rapidly creeping up on us, and I could already sense it in the crisp morning air, that biting chill riding the wind, and the unmistakable yellowing of the grasslands. We needed a massive food stockpile, or people would starve. The moment the heavy snows hit, I instructed Black Bull to blanket the entire region in hunting traps. More pitfall traps, more wooden spikes, more automated food gathering systems. At this point, we had well over 30 traps deployed along game trails and stationed around every local water source. And on some days, the daily yield was absolutely insane. Squad 1 hauled back over 40 animals in a single afternoon, with 24 snags straight from the traps alone, wild sheep, pigs, and rabbits, all fully alive and thrashing. Our livestock ranch had exploded to over 115 pigs and sheep combined, along with 20 rabbits hopping around inside their own dedicated pen. I had even constructed a brand new, significantly larger livestock compound right inside the settlement walls, ensuring the Wolf King couldn't attempt another late-night slaughter against my livestock, a literal fortress for livestock. I had also instructed the hunting teams to haul back anything out of the ordinary they stumbled upon: stones, vegetation, seeds, literally anything strange. Naturally, most of their haul was total trash, just ordinary rocks and wild weeds, things that looked promising at first glance, only to turn out to be ancient garbage. Then, out of nowhere, Squad 1 dumped their loot right in front of me. And sitting right in the middle of that trash pile was a pumpkin. A legit pumpkin. I almost lost my mind from pure joy. Pumpkins are basically the ultimate survival crop, growing rapidly, yielding massive harvests, storing easily, and being entirely edible. As a primary food source, they would dramatically reduce the strain on our meat supply. I held that misshapen, orange veggie as if it were pure, solid gold, and I probably looked like a complete lunatic to everyone standing around. However, the true treasure was hidden right beneath that pumpkin. Mountain hemp, wild plant fibers that could be crafted into rope, cordage, and thread. And here was the part that made my heart leap out of my chest. Vestidos actual clase, woven fabric and real clothing, instead of random animal pelts strapped around our waists. Even better, fishing nets, durable, flexible. Mountain hemp, rope woven into massive nets, capable of snagging dozens of fish simultaneously, saving me from standing in a freezing river, trying to spear them one by one using a bamboo pole. This single plant species was about to completely revolutionize our entire society. The very next morning, I guided Squad 1 straight back to that hemp field, and we gathered every single stalk within reach. It took hours of brutal work with stone blades, filling container after container. I also carefully uprooted living plants with their root systems, transporting them back to plant right outside the settlement walls. Come next season, we'd have our very own dedicated hemp farm, renewable, sustainable, and scalable. My inner agriculture geek was throwing a full-blown victory party that would have utterly mortified my old delivery driver self. On our way back, we inspected our snare lines, and the haul was definitely drying up. Years of intense trapping in this exact zone were seriously draining the local wildlife numbers. Its basic ecology, overhunt a single territory, and eventually your prey completely vanishes. Once the defensive wall is finished, I'll need to deploy our hunting squads deeper out, into untouched hunting grounds. Still, for the time being, we snagged 6 wild boars, 5 mountain goats, and 1 insanely unlucky wolf that had dropped into a pit trap and mauled itself attempting to break free. The beast was still growling and snapping viciously at us, despite having bamboo punji stakes driven straight through it. Without hesitating, Black Bull drove a spear right through its throat. Fast, clean, effortless. That's one less predator in a world that already had far too many wolves. For my personal liking, trekking back home carrying loads of raw hemp, hauling wagons loaded with livestock and pockets overflowing with pumpkin seeds, I started calculating in my head just how far the Huaisha tribe had come. We now had 3 fully trained battle units armed with bows, sturdy shields, sharp spears, and deadly slings. A fortified settlement housing 5 sturdy dwellings, proper hygiene setups, and heated stone beds. Well over 100 head of livestock, more than 30 active hunting traps, a dedicated armory managed by our tribal elders, 8 captives working on my perimeter wall in exchange for basic pottery, hot meals, and campfire warmth. And now, a fresh batch of raw materials to weave clothes and fishing nets. Honestly, all of this was built entirely from scratch by a guy whose biggest brag before the apocalypse was delivering 47 food orders back-to-back without spilling a single drink. I was actually beginning to think I might be a natural at this whole leader thing. We were making our way back after a super productive day checking traps, bagging 6 wild pigs, 5 goats, and a massive wolf that Black Bull personally finished off, when suddenly blood-curdling screams echoed from deeper down the valley. Now, the sensible move would have been to mind our own business and keep moving along. I'd already ordered 3 of my squad members to head back, with the animals, leaving just me and Black Bull, literally 2 guys, stepping right into whatever absolute madness was going down in those woods. So naturally, we went straight toward it to investigate, because apparently surviving wild wolves, hostile raids, and the harsh realities of the Stone Age just hadn't quite hit my daily quota of brushing with death yet. Sneaking through the dense thicket, we stumbled onto a scene that looked like it was pulled straight out of a blockbuster prehistoric action flick. 6 hostile warriors wearing chicken feathers in their hair and smeared head to toe in red war paint had completely trapped 2 people, a unit of a man who looked like a walking brick wall, mixed with a silverback gorilla alongside a young girl who looked way too delicate for this environment, like she stepped out of a classic painting and accidentally dropped right into a brutal brawl. The feather-headed attackers belonged to a group known as the Tao Tai tribe, a name that already sounded bad news, even before I witnessed the total carnage that followed. The massive guy, whose name was Gully, as I found out later, was swinging a heavy stone axe like it was light as a feather. He delivered a terrifying cleave at one of the Tao Tai raiders, who desperately raised a spear to block it. But the axe sliced right through the wooden shaft and ripped directly through the guy's midsection in one fluid motion. His guts spilled onto the dirt, before his brain could even process that he was already dead. I almost lost my stomach right then and there, while Black Bull's jaw dropped so low, I legitimately thought it was going to snap off. This Gully guy possessed the kind of terrifying, raw power that made a seasoned warrior like Black Bull look like a lightweight fitness instructor. Meanwhile, the girl, Qingwan, was definitely no helpless victim needing rescue either. She was taking on two Tao Tai fighters at the exact same time, and completely holding her ground, dodging deadly spear jabs, with the kind of insane reflexes that seemed virtually impossible for someone so young. She couldn't have been more than 14 or 15. Boasting a gorgeous face that belonged on a magazine cover. You know, if magazines were even a thing back then. Yet she moved like a seasoned warrior who'd been training for combat her whole life, ever since she could walk. And as it turned out, she pretty much had to. Gully was slicing through those Tao Tai fighters like they were made of wet cardboard, until some lucky bastard managed to drive a spear straight into the back of his thigh. Blood spurted everywhere as his leg gave out, so he yelled at Xinhuan to run while he held the line. Cue this super dramatic scene, where she flat out refuses to leave, while he keeps insisting she goes. Honestly, it was heart-wrenching, but terrifying at the same time, because a whole crowd of Tao Tai warriors was closing in. And the best part? Nobody even noticed that two complete strangers were ducked down in the bushes, taking in the whole show. Now, the Tao Tai leader was a real scumbag, who called himself Red Wolf, because, of course he did. It feels like literally every bad guy in this realm names themselves after some apex predator. Seriously, they must have some official naming playbook, designed specifically to test my patience. Red Wolf was doing his classic villain monologue, bragging about how the Tao Tai tribe was gearing up to raid the Firebird tribe's salt mine. Wait, a salt mine? My ears perked up so fast. I probably looked like a dog hearing a bag of treats shake. Salt. These people actually had access to salt, the exact mineral I've been practically dying for ever since I got thrown into this world. The one single thing standing between me and actually tasting something delicious again. My mouth was literally watering right in the middle of a life-or-death battle scene, which felt totally out of place, but I couldn't control it. Right then, Xinhuan spotted us crouching in the bushes and started screaming for help. Oh, fantastic. So much for keeping a low profile and staying out of it. Red Wolf snapped his eyes straight toward our hideout and went with the textbook villain move. Leave no witnesses, wipe them out too. He ordered two warriors to charge us with stone spears, while he moved in to finish off the injured Gully. Two killers sprinting straight at me with blood in their eyes. A situation that, 2 months ago, would have had former delivery guy Yibin curling into a ball and crying. But current Yibin? The Yibin who had hunted wolves, built a stronghold, wiped out a raiding party, and single-handedly kick-started tech in this valley? That Yibin raised his bow, knocked an arrow, and put a shaft clean through the first guy's throat, before the poor fool even realized what hit him. Black Bull took down the second one. A split second later, both attackers crumpled, gasping as blood pooled from their necks, dead in a matter of seconds. They didn't even make it within 20 meters of us. Red Wolf watched his two guys drop dead, like puppets having their strings cut, and his entire demeanor shifted instantly. He'd never seen a bow before in his life. Nobody in this world had, except for my people. So as far as he could tell, we just sniped two of his best men, using some crazy dark magic that could strike from mind-blowing distances. Just like that, all his tough guy confidence vanished into thin air. Still, that maniac attempted to end Gully's life, before making a break for it, thrusting his spear upward, aiming straight for the big guy's chest, to secure a quick kill before pulling back. I shot the weapon straight out of his grip. Well, technically, I put an arrow right through his arm, forcing him to let go of the spear, which honestly accomplishes the same thing. The arrow passed completely through his forearm, and he let out a shriek like he was being burned alive. Clutching his bloody arm, he cast one frantic, terrified glance at my bow, and sprinted straight into the woods. One of his remaining men, the exact guy Gully had disarmed earlier, was somehow still breathing, driven purely by adrenaline and raw venom. As he scrambled right behind him, Black Bull took aim at the fleeing pair, but slammed into a tree instead. I managed to loose a couple more shots, yet they vanished deep into the heavy foliage. How annoying. Red Wolf was going to pull through and loose lips sink ships. He'd definitely inform his clan about the mysterious weapon that snipes targets from far away, and eventually someone would come hunting for us. Still, pursuing two frantic survivors through unfamiliar woods, with only the two of us, was a recklessly stupid gamble I simply wasn't prepared to take. Xingwan hobbled over, propping up the badly injured Gully, and my brain instantly flipped from battle mode to full-on negotiation mode. She formally introduced herself, and as it turned out, her father was the leader of the Firebird tribe, a massive community of 30,000 people. 30,000. My whole clan consisted of just 31 free members and 8 captives. This girl's clan dwarfed ours by a factor of 1,000. The Firebird tribe was a legit, fully functional civilization, complete with structured armed forces and trade networks. And here was the absolute jackpot. Salt deposits, actual functional salt mines, that they actively worked and guarded with soldiers. Xingwan's convoy was mid-transport with a salt shipment when the Taotai tribe caught them in a surprise attack. 200 of her protective forces fell in the clash, alongside 200 Taotai aggressors. And out of that absolute bloodbath, Xingwan and Gully were the sole survivors. On her side, from what she gathered, the Taotai clan was gearing up for an all-out invasion against the Firebird salt mines, which only had 2,000 defenders on site, nowhere near enough to repel a full-scale assault. She stared at my bow the exact same way I stare at a hot pizza, with complete, unadulterated longing. She begged for a trial run, and despite my better judgment, I let her loose a single shot at a nearby tree trunk. She struck it dead center on her first attempt. The girl was an absolute prodigy, and her eyes sparkled, as if I just unlocked the secrets of the universe for her. If the Firebird tribe were equipped with these arms, we could crush the Taotai forces without breaking a sweat, she declared, practically buzzing with adrenaline. Then came the pitch. She wanted to strike a deal. Salt blocks, pelts, even domesticated beasts. Legitimate livestock people could actually ride, all in exchange for my bows and arrows. My brain was practically screaming with excitement. Salt would instantly fix our biggest dietary deficiency, and riding beasts would completely revolutionize our hunting and scouting game. Those pelts would keep my people cozy all winter long. Literally everything I could ever want served on a silver platter. Yet my gut screamed at me. Giving 30,000 warriors bows and arrows wasn't just a threat to the Taotai tribe. It made them a massive hazard to everyone around. And that definitely meant us, above all. A clan that size equipped with the single deadliest, long-range weapon in existence could easily steamroll everything within a 1,000-mile radius. And we'd end up as the clueless little camp who handed them total control on a silver platter. Think about it. What happens when a giant military power runs out of enemies? It turns its sights on its own neighbors. We had prime land and livestock, women and valuable goods. We'd turned from allies to prime targets the second they decided to take what was ours. So I shut her down, polite but dead serious. No bows for trade, period. No matter the price, which made Xingwan's face drop completely. She instantly tried pivot strategy, asking to come check out my settlement, promising a mountain of free salt as a gift. Sounds super generous, right? But it was insanely suspicious. Inviting the princess of a 30,000-strong armada straight into my tiny village of just 31 people was basically handing her a full-blown military intelligence report on us. She'd immediately spot our laughably small population, our half-baked walls, and pathetic defense setup, especially compared to the massive army her clan could mobilize. She'd head right back home and report that this mysterious, bow-wielding threat was really just a bunch of scrawny kids, huddling in mud huts. Our only real leverage was the mystery, the fear of the unknown, thanks to Red Wolf sprinting back home, absolutely terrified, hyping us up as masters of invisible death weapons. The second anyone realized how weak we actually were, all that fear-based leverage would instantly vanish. So I gave her a polite excuse about not taking guests right now, flashed an apologetic smile, and smoothly redirected the conversation. Man, inside I was screaming, because I was practically drooling over that salt, desperately wanting those furs, dreaming of riding an actual mount, instead of trekking everywhere in flimsy straw, sandals like some low-class peasant. But surviving in this world means playing 4D chess. And right about now, protecting our secrets was infinitely more valuable than any trade deal. Xingwan was clearly bummed out, though she didn't lose her temper. Besides, Gully was gushing blood and desperately needed medical aid. ASAP. They had way bigger fires to extinguish than a rejected weapons deal. I helped patch up the gash on Gully's leg. This absolute madman had been fighting with a spear hole straight through his thigh for the last 20 minutes, which was either total badassery or sheer stupidity. Honestly, probably a mix of both, before pointing them toward a safe escape route, far away from Tautai hunting grounds. As I made my way back home with Black Bull, my brain was going into absolute overdrive. The Firebird clan, the terrifying Tautai tribe, massive salt mines, armies 1,000 strong, full-scale warfare, leaving hundreds dead on the battlefield. Turns out this world was way vast, and far more deadly than I ever thought. We weren't just clashing with wolf packs, or tiny groups of pillagers. Actual civilizations were out here, rising empires fighting full-blown wars for the exact resources I desperately needed. And right in the eye of that storm was the Huaisha tribe, 31 people, 8 slaves, a half-built wall, and a delivery guy holding a bow, just trying not to get squashed by titans. Yeah, I needed that wall finished yesterday. Before we split up, I patched up the massive warrior. His name was Gully, and his thigh had a gash, big enough to park a small animal inside. Qingwan, the princess of a massive 30,000-strong tribe, stood there watching me fix him up, and asked me what bandaging even was. She'd literally never heard the term. In her world, medical care meant mashing up some leaves, slapping them right on the wound, and then praying to the heavens to see if you survived or not. Basically a 50-50 chance if you were lucky. Luckily, I spotted some cranesbill herbs nearby, crushed them up, and stuffed them straight into Gully's wound. The giant guy thanked me with a single word. Thanks, which, coming from a dude who was slicing enemies in half with a stone axe just 10 minutes ago, was practically a romantic poem. Qingwan wanted to know how to track me down again, determined to send salt over as a gesture of gratitude. And honestly, just hearing the word salt made my brain go wild, like a slot machine hitting the grand jackpot. I told her to meet me right back here in 10 days, and begged her, for the love of all things holy, not to bring an entire army along. She picked up on what I meant right away. When your tribe outnumbers someone else's by roughly 1,000-to-1, showing up with a welcome squad feels way less like a friendly visit, and a lot more like an armed invasion. She asked for my name, I gave it to her, and we headed our separate ways. Qingwan, practically dragging Gully back toward her massive empire, and me alongside Black Bull, plodding back to our cozy little mud fortress. That long walk home gave me way too much time to overthink, and every single thought was nightmare fuel. The Firebird tribe had 30,000 members. The Tautai clan was apparently massive enough to jump 200 fighters, and still have endless forces waiting in reserve. These were massive civilizations running on a scale I hadn't even believed possible in a place like this. Full armies, salt mines, trade networks, structured military operations. And then there was me, the chief of 31 free tribesmen and 8 unhappy captives, hunkered down behind a wall that wasn't even close to finished. I felt like a tiny ant that just realized giant elephants existed, and they were living right next door. By the time I finally stepped through our gate, my anxiety was hitting an all-time high, about to straight up blow a fuse. Yet watching my people drill out in the courtyard actually managed to take the edge off. Flower Queen was running point for the women's unit in a mock battle against Black Panther's squad, and honestly, it was mind-blowing. These ladies had leveled up in just a matter of weeks, turning from peaceful berry gatherers into shield-toting, spear-thrusting badasses who could go toe-to-toe with the guys. Flower Queen was basically a walking battering ram. She barreled forward behind her shield, like a human wrecking ball, nearly flattening Black Panther on the spot, while her spear line snuck stabs through the openings behind her. However, as I locked eyes on the clash, I caught a fatal flaw. Everyone was purely going all in on attack or defense, never blending both at once. The shield bearers were just tanking hits like stone statues, while the spear users threw thrusts, with zero self-preservation instinct, zero coordination between offense and defense. Meaning, in a real life-or-death fight against battle-hardened vets, they get wiped out instantly. A warrior who only blocks would just get outflanked, and a warrior who only strikes will inevitably get run through. So I called a timeout and pulled everyone together for a masterclass in tactics, courtesy of Professor Yibin, holder of a PhD in internet combat logic. The idea was dead simple, yet mind-blowing, for a bunch of folks whose ultimate war strategy was charge a bad guy and poke with sharp stick. Left hand keeps the shield raised for cover. Right hand drives the spear forward to strike. You pull off both actions simultaneously. When 10 of you lock shoulders like this, you turn into an impenetrable shield wall. That doubles as an iron wall of spears. Enemies can't break through because of the shields, and they can't step close because of the spears. Behold, the legendary phalanx formation, the very same doctrine that rendered ancient Greek forces undefeatable for generations, dumbed down so even a caveman could digest it. They all hit me with that iconic blank stare that said, how on earth did we never think of something so ridiculously simple? Before diving back into practice, with vastly improved teamwork, small wins. Next, I tracked down Black Bull to get an update on our livestock numbers. He attempted to explain our head count, except he couldn't count high at all. Actually, scratch that, he couldn't count period. Turns out math isn't really a thing in the prehistoric era. He just threw out wild hand gestures and grunted out noises that roughly translated to a whole bunch, way more than before, and a ton of the fluffy, noisy ones. Feeling a headache coming on, I dragged him over to the pens to do the math myself. Roughly 170 heads of livestock, sheep, pigs, and rabbits, all wandering around, grazing, making racket, and generally staying healthy and alive, which was the whole objective to begin with. However, managing 170 animals triggered a brand new headache. Keeping all those hungry mouths fed. The youngsters were cutting grass manually every day, and there was just no way in hell a small group of kids could gather enough feed to satisfy 170 ravenous livestock. We desperately needed a full-time grass-mowing crew, a luxury we completely lacked, considering every single member was already juggling 3 different tasks. My workaround? Pure unadulterated laziness. I linked all the sheep together into one massive chain, tying each one's neck collar to the next, and tasked a worker to guide the whole parade, straight out to the pastures. Every single morning, the flock could stuff their faces with endless open fields, and escaping was out of the question, since they were all tethered to one another. If one sheep freaked out and darted left, while another bolted off to the right, they just clothesline each other and hit the dirt. The only way the entire line could break free was if every single sheep on that rope agreed to run in the exact same direction at the exact same moment. And if you know anything about sheep, the odds of that happening are about the same as the mastering calculus. Black Bull stood there watching me explain the setup, his expression turning darker than usual. Chief, are you even human? He muttered, staring at the livestock chain, with a mix of sheer awe and total moral conflict, coming from a guy named Black Bull. That was basically high praise. Meanwhile, the perimeter wall was coming along great, roughly halfway finished with around 400 meters remaining. The slave labor force was chained up in pairs, using short ropes bound to their matching wrists and ankles. So, if either one tried to make a break for it, they'd both bite the dust hard. They quickly realized that working together hurt way less than face-planting. After every couple of steps, a rotating patrol unit kept watch over them with drawn bows. Though to be totally honest, these prisoners had given up on escaping weeks ago. They were eating far better as captives in Yahello than they ever did as free men back in the Stone Tribe. 2 guaranteed square meals a day was apparently a much sweeter deal than having the freedom to starve to death out in the wild. The irony definitely wasn't lost on me, but I wasn't about to lose sleep over feeding people who literally tried to slaughter us. That afternoon, I turned my attention to a project I've been dying to tackle ever since Unit 1 returned with those wild hemp plants. Fiber processing. I submerged bundles of hemp in water for a few hours to soften up the stalks, then peeled them apart, extracted the inner fibers, and spun them into rope by rubbing them against a wooden post. It was strong, flexible, all-purpose rope, infinitely better than woven grass cord, better than wild vines, and superior to anything we'd used before. With this stuff, we could craft fishing nets, sturdy thread, bowstrings, actual clothing fabrics, and about 100 other things I've been daydreaming about. Since I first got dragged into this world, I gathered the tribe's elders and began teaching them the method. Old Bear and his crew mastered the technique in no time. Their hands were steady and patient, honed by weeks of crafting arrows and shaping pottery. In less than an hour, they were cranking out rope at an impressive rate, cheerfully chatting with one another. These elders had gone from being viewed as dead weight that the tribe barely put up with, to becoming the absolute most productive manufacturing team in our entire village. They crafted weapons, pottery, shields, sandals, and now rope. They were basically running our entire industrial sector single-handedly, and they were enjoying every single second of it. That's when I revealed my secret weapon, wool. We had been skinning sheep for their hides, but the wool itself was just getting tossed out like trash. No one here had ever even imagined turning soft animal fur into usable thread. I crafted a basic drop spindle using a stick, with a hole carved at the top and a weight on the bottom. Brushed out the raw wool with a bamboo comb that I rigged up on the fly and started spinning away. You just pinch a clump of wool, attach it to the spindle, give it a quick flick, and let gravity handle the rest. As the spindle twirls, the wool fibers interlock and twist into yarn, and bit by bit, you create actual thread that can be woven straight into fabric. The elders gathered around me, staring at me spinning wool like I was performing literal magic. Their faces went through the classic sequence: pure confusion, total disbelief, jaw-dropping shock, and finally, that desperate look that said, "Teach me, right now." The moment they realized that the fluff growing on, the very animals they were eating, could be transformed into cozy, soft fabric for clothes, blankets, and rope, they stared at me, as if I had just unlocked a cheat code for life itself. Which, honestly, I kind of had, condensing thousands of years of human textile evolution into a single afternoon crash course. While the rope and wool production was getting up to speed, I uncovered a truth from Old Bear that completely knocked the wind out of me. He opened up about Luo, Shure's mother, how she had been abducted by the wolf tribe years ago, how Black Bull had spearheaded a rescue attempt, how Old Bear himself was permanently crippled in the battle, and how, despite all their desperate efforts, Luo Shure's mother was murdered by the wolf tribe right before they could reach her. That was the real reason behind Old Bear's limp. That was why Black Bull harbored such a heavy, painful silence behind his eyes, and that was why Luo Shure had spent her life without a mother, raised by a tribe far too consumed by basic survival to offer a little girl the warmth she truly deserved, standing right there in the fading light of dusk, listening to an old man recount how he had ruined his own body, trying to save a woman who lost her life anyway. Something hardened inside my chest, a vow cold, calculating, absolute vow that I locked away in the deepest recesses of my heart, though I kept it completely to myself. The wolf tribe was going to pay a heavy price for what they did. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but eventually, once Huaxia had grown powerful enough, when our walls towered over the land, our army was fully trained, and our weapons were razor sharp, I was going to hunt them down and show them the brutal reality of what happens when you mess with the wrong people. Looking out over my modest little settlement, from the mud walls to the training squads, the livestock pens, the smoking chimneys, the elders spinning wool, and the kids laughing near the entrance, with Luo Shi's silhouette gliding through the twilight, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that everything I was building here was worth dying for. Just 10 days until my next meeting with Qing Wan. 10 days to bulk up, prepare, and figure out how to strike a deal with a massive powerhouse without getting devoured alive. 10 short days to transform my ragtag tribe of 31 misfits into a force capable of earning the respect of a princess ruling 30,000. Time to grind, I thought to myself. It was high time we stopped playing defense and took the offensive. For a change. That whole Stone Tribe situation was a ticking time bomb waiting to blow. Their raiding party had been MIA way too long, and sooner or later, their remaining 20-something warriors would come looking for answers, and when they finally figured out what happened, they'd end up right on our doorstep. Better to break down their door before they had the chance to break down mine. Besides, my squads had been training around the clock, and were desperately in need of a real test. There's no better way to test your army than by throwing them right into combat. The witch, of course, thought I was completely out of my mind. It's far too dangerous, she protested, shaking her head like I had just proposed a battle against the sun. They have 20 warriors. We stand no chance. Classic witch, always assuming that we were still those same starving refugees who fled from wolves just 6 weeks ago. However, Black Bull backed my play immediately, and the rest of the warriors fell right into line. Once the muscle gives you the green light, the shaman gets instantly outvoted. Democracy in action, Stone Age style. I assembled an elite strike force, both of our hunting squads, plus 3 female warriors drafted straight from Flower Queen's unit. A total of 11 fighters, including myself, taking the lead. Every warrior was geared up with a shield, a stone spear, a bow equipped with 20 stone-tipped arrows, and enough dried meat to sustain a 5-day march. However, the true game changer was crafted the night before we set off. Remember those hemp ropes I had just figured out how to craft? I put them to work completely overhauling every single bow in our arsenal, moving away from those flimsy single bamboo bows. I lashed 2 bamboo strips together to create reinforced, Double-layered bows with a sturdier frame, a significantly heavier draw, and vastly superior lethal power. On top of that, I attached wild chicken feathers to the end of every arrow shaft. For extra stability, I've been nagging Black Bull to hoard feathers for weeks, and the big guy delivered without even realizing what it was for. Fully fletched, stabilized arrows fired from a composite bow. To put in modern terms, I basically handed everyone an upgrade from handguns to sniper rifles. Black Bull was the first one to take it for a spin. He drew back the brand new bow, putting all 200-plus pounds of primeval muscle into it, pulling that string straight back to his ear, and released an arrow that zipped way past 100 meters, slamming headfirst into a tree trunk, sinking so deep the fletching was still humming. By the time we ran over to check it out, literally everyone's jaw dropped at the exact same time, which, honestly at this point, was just the default look for this tribe whenever I did anything. I had just created 100 meters of deadly range, in an era where the absolute best weapon could barely hit 40 meters. If you were lucky and had a good breeze behind you, we literally just skipped forward hundreds of years of military tech evolution in a single night. We churned out 20 of those upgraded bows before dawn, all while I gave Flower Queen her standing orders. Protect the base, keep an eye on the captives, and drop anyone who tries to make a break for it. Zero hesitation, zero mercy. She gave me a nod like I just casually asked for the butter. That girl was almost frighteningly cold. At sunrise, we set off toward the east. 2 straight days of rapid trekking, taking down game along the way, to stretch out our food supply and give the crew some actual live target practice. By the time we hit the Stone Tribe's turf, every single member had landed a few clean shots. On running game, battlefield readiness was peaked, though nerves were definitely on edge. We spotted them set up by a riverbed, huddled under 2 miserable huts, a bigger one for the adults, and a tiny one for the kids. I positioned my squad on a ridge overlooking their campsite, and sure enough, everything lined up with what their captured chief had blabbed about. Around 20 dudes, 15 women, and 5 little kids. They were gathered outside, completely devouring a raw wild boar, hacking away at it with rough stone daggers, with blood dripping all over their chins and forearms. No campfire, no roasting. Just straight up ripping raw meat off the bone and shoving it down their throats, like rabid zombies at an all-you-can-eat bar. Honestly, watching that whole spectacle made my stomach do backflips. The men got first dibs, while the women and children were forced to sit off to the side, staring hungrily and waiting to scavenge whatever was left over. Classic caveman social ladder. The fighters stuff their faces, and everyone else gets the trash. For a split second, I almost felt a wave of sympathy, but then reality hit me. These were the exact same savages who raided my home, trying to slaughter my people and loot my farm. So yeah, that pity disappeared real quick. I made the call to wait until they all passed out, maximizing our element of surprise while minimizing the danger. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I double-checked a crucial game-changer. Our steady diet of organ meats over the last few weeks had completely fixed my crew's night blindness. We had full-on night vision now. Meanwhile, the Stone Tribe, who clearly didn't have the luxury of eating rich organ meats, were going to be as blind as bats the moment darkness fell. A massive tactical advantage. But first, we had to endure the absolute most awkward. It took 30 minutes into our military campaign for the Stone Tribe to head back inside their hideout and immediately get down to making babies at full volume, overly enthusiastic, showing complete disregard for the obvious fact that everyone was crammed into the exact same room. Those moans echoed right across the hill, straight to my whole strike team. In perfect, crisp quality, picture 11 fighters sitting in pitch darkness, weapons drawn, turning bright red, forced to listen to the enemy's pre-battle bedtime fun, while desperately trying to keep their tactical focus. Once the racket finally died down, I exhaled a breath I didn't even realize I was holding, and gave the go-ahead. 5 spear and shield wielders leading the charge, backed up by 6 archers, moving silently. My heart was pounding against my ribcage so hard. I legit thought the Stone Tribe would hear it. This was my very first offensive maneuver, my first time playing the attacker, rather than the defender. Every single survival guide video, historical documentary, and war film I had ever binged was flashing through my head all at once, and none of them could have prepared me for what it felt like to sneak up on a shelter, packed with sleeping people while holding a weapon. We reached the main entrance of the shelter. I gave the command, and Black Bull stormed in first, because of course Black Bull goes first. The guy is physically incapable of not taking the lead. His spear locked onto the guy, sporting feathers in his hair. Their second in command, their current leader, or whoever was shot calling, while their chief was sitting bound back at my camp, and impaled him right through the heart. One strike, instant death. The guy gagged up blood, twitched, and dropped dead before he even processed what hit him. The other 4 shield wielders poured in right behind Black Bull, each picking a sleeping target, and landing a single fatal blow. 5 men down in the first 3 seconds of the assault, and then the screaming broke out. Every remaining member of the Stone Tribe snapped awake in sheer panic. Men scrambled for weapons. Women screamed and backed up against the walls. It was total pandemonium, pitch black and bloody, and, right in the thick of it all, my archers stepped up and pinned arrows into every male figure left on their feet. The sound of bowstrings twanging, and arrows slicing into flesh inside a tight space. That's something that'll stay burned in my mind forever. 4 or 5 men collapsed on the spot, shot through their chests, throats, and stomachs. Some dying on impact, others shrieking on the floor, wallowing in pools of their own blood. The 9 surviving Stone Tribe men stared at the bloodbath surrounding them, and all unanimously agreed that fighting back was off the table. They were trembling so violently. Their stone spears were literally clattering on the dirt. I yelled at them to drop their gear and hit the ground face down. They submitted so fast that, honestly, a couple of them hit the dirt before the words even left my mouth. The women surrendered right after, and Black Bull's crew swooped in with ropes, tying everyone up like livestock in seconds. Next up, we cleared out the children's hut, finding 5 little kids around 4 or 5 years old, terrified out of their minds and bawling their eyes out. I'm not gonna lie, that part sucked. In fact, none of this felt good at all. Then again, allowing the Stone Tribe to regroup and hit us back with 30 warriors would have ended up way worse. I stood just outside their miserable settlement, taking in the whole mess, and decided to inspect their food stockpiles. Zip, absolutely nothing saved up. Not a single piece of dried meat, nor any preserved rations whatsoever. These guys were literally living hand to mouth, surviving purely off whatever they dragged home that day, and straight up starving when the hunt failed. No wonder they tried to ambush us. They were completely desperate. That doesn't make attempted murder okay, but at least their motives made sense. Starving people make dumb choices, and I've gone hungry enough in this world to know that. Still, the kid situation weighed heavily on me. The 9 surviving men were becoming slaves. They brought that on themselves by attacking us. The 15 women, however, would join as full members, since they weren't involved in the fight. Plus, we badly needed to boost our population anyway. But those 5 toddlers? I couldn't enslave kids. I couldn't just dump them out in the wild either. And I definitely refused to do anything darker than that. Look, even in the Stone Age, a former delivery driver holds on to some moral lines you just don't cross. I'd figure out a solution later. For now, they were coming back to camp with us. Then, I made a quick side trip that changed everything. Turns out the Stone Tribe earned their name for a reason. Their land sat right next to a rocky hill, littered with some very unusual stones. I hiked up to take a closer look, and my heart almost skipped a beat. Iron ore, legit iron-bearing rock. It was reddish-brown, heavy as hell, and carried the distinct metallic heft that practically screamed, "Melt me down, and I'll jumpstart your entire civilization." I've been obsessed with getting my hands on metal ever since getting thrown into this world, and here it was just sitting right on a slope, waiting for someone with half a brain to spot it. I forced every single captive to haul a sack packed with, or 24 prisoners, lugging 24 bags of the single most priceless resource in the prehistoric era. I had them tethered together by their necks in a long line, so if anyone tried to make a break for it, they'd end up choking the guy right behind them. Harsh, maybe. Effective? 100%. Even my own squad members carried a small pouch each. Black Bull hoisted his bag and threw me that classic look. The expression that says, "I follow you blindly, but I have zero clue why we're lugging random dirt rocks around." Bro, these aren't just rocks, they're pure gold. I informed him, smirking like a guy who just struck absolute gold, which meant iron tools were on the horizon. Iron weaponry, iron plows, axes, nails, and pretty much everything else that separates a booming civilization from cavemen munching raw meat in grass huts. We began our trek back home with our new captives, our freshly mined ore, and whatever game we hunted along the way. The slaves were fed just barely enough to keep them moving, enough fuel to carry heavy rocks, but nowhere near enough energy to plot a rebellion. Was I proud of treating them like this? Not really, but But was there any better alternative? In a world without a single prison, no court systems, and zero rehab facilities. Honestly, I couldn't think of one. They came to slaughter us and failed miserably. So now they were hauling the very resources that would guarantee no one would ever mess with my tribe again. Somewhere in the back of the line, 5 little kids trailed behind, alongside the adults who used to be their parents, marching toward a strange new life, built by an ice-eyed teenage chief who just couldn't stop accidentally, building an entire empire. Your average delivery boy had officially leveled up to conqueror, and truth be told, the job benefits were completely awful. But man, the job satisfaction was off the charts. After 3 brutal days of nonstop walking, we finally made it back to the village. My legs were absolutely destroyed, but to be real, I was way more stressed about how Flower Queen handled things, keeping all those prisoners in line while I was gone. I mean, leaving her in charge. What could possibly go wrong, right? Turns out a whole lot almost did. She filmed me in that right after we left. A few slaves got foolish enough to attempt a breakout during dinner. Huge mistake, guys. Like, seriously terrible idea. First off, they could barely even stand, tripping over themselves like wasted toddlers. Then Flower Queen whipped out her bow and pinned an arrow right through one guy's leg, blood spraying everywhere. The guy was screaming and rolling around on the dirt, acting like a soccer player flopping for a penalty. Except for the fact that this time, it was very, very real. The rest of the slaves witnessed that little display, and suddenly, all urge to escape instantly vanished. Smart move. The perimeter wall was nearly finished when we returned, so I marched the captives from the Stone Tribe straight over to complete the construction. Their former chieftain saw his entire clan slaving away for us now, and looked like he had just sucked on a sour lemon. Sorry about that, pal. Maybe next time. Think twice before starting a war with the Huaisha tribe. Old Man Bear came sprinting toward me, hyped up like an overexcited grandfather. He had crafted everything I ordered: ropes, woolen strings, 30 earthenware pots, 20 clay basins, and 100 clay bowls. He then asked if I needed even more pottery made. I told him we were set. We're good on supplies. I'm building tribe here, not opening a retail ceramics store. That's when Luo showed up, and man, let me tell you, this girl somehow managed to get even cuter while I was away. Her skin was glowing, and she looked absolutely stunning. Not that I was standing there creeping on her or anything, of course. I actually had important chieftain duties to attend to, like teaching our tribe how to make proper fishing nets. So I grabbed Luo, along with Old Man Bear, and walked them through the whole technique. It took us a couple of hours, but we ended up weaving a net roughly 4 to 5 meters long. Honestly, pretty impressive for Stone Age craftsmanship. Next came a fun part. I took the women down to the riverbank to give them a live demonstration. I threw in this ridiculously dramatic spin. Picture me pulling off a full 360-degree turn, like I'm some sort of prehistoric superhero, and hurled that net straight into the water. I drag it back in and bam. Over a dozen fat fish were flopping around inside. The women stared at me like I had just invented fire all over again, literally starry-eyed with absolute awe. Whole 9 yards, you know? Yeah, I'm pretty much a genius, no big deal. I left them there to keep hauling in fish, and headed back to check on our city's progress. The defensive walls were finished, leaving space for 60 houses inside. However, we were still missing a main gate, which is kind of essential, unless you want wild beasts and rival tribes just wandering in like it's a neighborhood open house. I set the male slaves to chopping down timber, had the women digging up mud, keeping everyone busy. We had 17 male slaves working now, so construction was moving ridiculously fast. Meanwhile, my second squad was posted up on the walls armed with bows, keeping a sharp eye on everything, so if a slave tried anything funny, they'd instantly be turned into a human pincushion. Needless to say, nobody dared test them, and by evening, the fishing team returned carrying a massive haul of over 200 fish, every single one weighing easily 4 or 5 pounds. You see, in this primitive era, nobody goes fishing simply because no one has the proper gear. These rivers are basically untouched, all-you-can-eat buffets that nobody had tapped into until right now. And let me tell you, the entire tribe swarmed around that mountain of fish, like shoppers on Black Friday rushing a mall food court. People were literally shouting and cheering in excitement. I announced to everyone that tonight we feast on fish, whether grilled or boiled. Whatever you prefer. Even the slaves were wide-eyed, watching our women haul in a catch like that. You could practically hear their brains short-circuiting. Like, wait, even their women can gather this much food? We managed to get the main gate built that evening as well. A massive 400-pound slab of solid timber. It took every available man just to lift it into place. We set up 6 heavy wooden posts fitted with ropes and a pulley system, allowing us to crank the heavy gate open. When that giant gate slowly swung upward for the very first time, I swear every single person stood a little prouder. This was officially our city now. The Huaxia tribe finally possessed a real, legit fortress. Dinner turned into a massive celebration. I handed out a clay bowl and a pair of chopsticks to every slave, even making the kids line up in an orderly fashion. No line, no food. Simple rules. The women dished out cooked fish and rich fish soup, and those slaves devoured it, like they'd never tasted real, delicious food in their entire lives. Which, honestly, they really hadn't. A few of those female captives literally broke into tears, just from getting a serving of fish, showing you just how brutal their previous existence was. My clan managed to devour 30 fish that evening, leaving us with a massive stash of 170. Whatever we couldn't finish by tomorrow was getting turned into jerky, because under my rule, 0 resources go to waste. Once dinner wrapped up, I crammed all the prisoners into 2 separate rooms, 18 crammed into one, and 19 stuffed into the other, with them packed tightly like sardines. I called an all-hands tribal meeting and dropped a brand new organizational structure on everyone. Old Man Bear was designated as chief of production, leading a 3-person team to handle the kiln, charcoal burning, rope weaving, arrowheads, and spear crafting, making him essentially our factory manager. Luo, she was put in charge of the fishing department, running a 2-man crew to catch our meals. Flower Queen took over as commander of security, leading 5 warriors to keep all of us alive. Rain, a tall kid who's roughly my age, was appointed head of livestock, managing 3 people to guard our animals. Black Bull led Hunting Squad 1, taking 3 guys with him on hunting duty. Black Panther headed Combat Squad 2, commanding a 2-man strike unit. Red, the fierce woman who helped me build the kiln, built like an absolute tank and a master cook, became head of the cafeteria, using 2 helpers to feed the whole village. And Wu, our resident shaman, took charge of the medical division with 2 assistants to treat the injured. That made 31 people in total, every single one assigned a specific role. And every single department reported straight to one guy, me. I was practically operating a miniature government out here, and I wasn't even old enough to grow a full beard yet. With the meeting wrapped up, Squad 2 took the initial night watch along the barricades, posting 1 guard at every corner. I even took a shift myself, because that's how true leaders earn respect. The Black Bulls rotated in at midnight to swap places, and at long last, I finally got a crash, knowing we had to construct more homes tomorrow. Man, running a whole tribe is utterly exhausting. When morning rolled around, Red had already whipped up breakfast. That woman's efficiency is insane. I ordered her to serve the captives half rations. It might sound harsh, but there's method to my madness. Feed them just enough fuel to work hard all day, but not enough energy to plot a breakout. Call it diabolical if you want, but it works like a charm. I started handing out daily duties like an absolute boss. Luo, she was assigned to fish. Flower Queen kept watch over the captives at the entrance. Old Man Bear went back to quarrying stone. Wu went out to gather medicinal herbs. I even gave her the fancy title of Director Wu, and Rain took the livestock out to graze. Then I rallied both combat squads and marched toward the valley, bordering the Yellow River to go hunting. Now this valley was basically an all-you-can-eat buffet of game. Yet nobody ever dared venture there, because it was infested with wild packs of dogs and lions. Most primitive tribes hear lions and immediately run the other way. I hear lions and tell my crew to pack extra arrows. We stepped out looking like absolute badasses, shields ready, spears locked, bows slung across our backs, marching in tight formation like a legendary ancient army. Honestly, if an artist painted us right then, the masterpiece would be hanging in a museum today. We set up our position at the valley's entrance with a flawless strategy. Wait for a herd to wander by, unleash a deadly volley of arrows, and watch the beast collapse right on the spot. The animals behind them panic and stampede right through that narrow gap. A massive trampling ensues, leaving free meat everywhere. And after that, we just march in and harvest it all. No dangerous wrestling required. Black Bull took in the whole strategy and stared at me as if I were the greatest genius in human history, which, for this primitive era, I honestly might be, but right as we were starting, I noticed a group off in the distance being hunted down. I ordered everyone to hold their positions and wait. As the figures drew closer, my stomach sank when I recognized that unmistakable silhouette. It was Bloodwolf, one of the Wolf tribe's top 4 commanders, the very same maniac who nearly wiped out the entire Falling Water tribe. The whole reason my people were forced to flee in the first place. He had around 30 warriors pursuing roughly 30 refugees. Women, children, and men, all frantically running for survival. Blood Wolf closed the gap on one poor guy and slammed a spear straight through his abdomen. Guts spilling, blood gushing everywhere. A complete horror scene. Women were screaming in terror while Blood Wolf just grinned, literally smiling. This sick bastard was loving every second of it. And that was the last straw for me. Just as Blood Wolf raised his spear to take another life, I gave the command. 8 arrows ripped through the air with insane speed. He didn't even have time to react. 2 of them slammed right into his chest. He collapsed to the dirt like a heavy sack of stones, with blood pouring out of his mouth. And his men started dropping like flies too, screaming and crashing down all around him. We unleashed volley after volley. Over 20 Wolf Tribe warriors were wiped out before they could even realize where the lethal shots were coming from. Our composite bows at point-blank range are absolute instruments of destruction. There's literally no dodging these things. Only 7 of them managed to stay on their feet, clutching their spears so tightly the wooden shafts creaked. A few suicidal fools actually tried to charge at us. I ordered to fire, turning them instantly into human pincushions. The last 5 immediately dropped their weapons and slammed their faces into the dirt. Smart move if they wanted to live. I walked over to Blood Wolf, my sworn enemy lying there, gasping for breath, desperately trying to utter some words to us. To the very falling water survivors he once relentlessly hunted. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then his head fell limp to the side, and he breathed his last. Yeah, an arrow directly through the heart tends to do that. A flood of chaotic emotions rushed over me. But above all, it felt like the universe had finally served proper justice. The helpless victims Blood Wolf had been hunting finally approached, showering me with endless gratitude. Their chieftain turned out to be the man who was impaled in the stomach. I took one look at him and knew there was no saving him. His intestines were literally lying on the ground. The women broke down crying, and it was brutal to witness. I asked what led to this, and a woman named Ju revealed that the Wolf Tribe had demanded 10 women from their mountain tribe. When their chieftain refused, Blood Wolf launched a massacre to wipe them out. They had been fleeing all night, but couldn't outrun him. If we hadn't happened to be lying in wait right here, setting up our hunting trap, not a single one of them would have survived. Fate really works in mysterious ways sometimes. I took a look at these folks, no weapons, no strategy, no one in charge. With winter fast approaching, so I gave them a deal. Come join us, eat the same food, get the same respect as full-fledged members of the Huasha tribe. My only rule was that your old tribe's name is dead. You're part of our family now. She headed back to discuss it with her group. It took them a bit, which I actually respected. It was a huge call, but she eventually returned and accepted. That made 29 new members joining us. 14 adult men, 10 women, 5 children, and Ju herself turned out to be their spiritual shaman. So I basically went out for a basic hunt and returned with 5 fresh captives and a whole extra tribe. Honestly, not a bad haul at all. I instructed Ju and her mountain crew to come along for the hunt. Right before we made our way home, assigned their men to watch over the captives, and marched the entire group right to the edge of the valley. The timing was unreal as herds started streaming in, like peak rush hour on a busy highway. I held off until half the herd moved through, then gave the signal, letting a volley of arrows rain down. Around 20-some beasts took direct hits. Blood went flying everywhere, and right then, one terrified buffalo decided to bolt straight ahead, and that single spark lit the fuse. Every single herbivore in that entire valley completely panicked. All at once, tens of thousands of animals triggered a massive stampede, flattening absolutely everything in their way. US. People looked like they were witnessing the end of the world. The women were huddled together, shivering in fear, while the men were shaking from head to toe. I literally had to yell at them to chill out and stop psyching themselves out. An hour later, once the dust cleared up, I tallied up over 120 dead animals, strewn all across the valley floor. Wild boars, wild sheep, small buffalo, and antelopes. It was basically a full-on prehistoric supermarket down there. Then I picked up some faint mooing and spotted 3 baby calves, battered but still breathing, so I wrapped up their legs, bound their heads together, and claimed them officially for the ranch. My little farm collection just keeps on growing. Now, here's where things got pretty tricky. 120 massive animal carcasses versus 37 people plus 5 bound wolf tribe captives. The logistics just weren't adding up. So I improvised a primitive sledding system. ordered everyone to cut down bamboo, bind it into rafts, stack the animal bodies right on top, and just haul it, since smooth bamboo glides effortlessly on grass. Every single person was hauling 2 or 3 beasts behind them, looking like the most terrifying caravan you've ever seen. I also shackled the 5 captives' feet together, so if one guy tried to break away and run, they'd all go crashing down like a line of dominoes. After 2 brutal days of hauling loot, we finally caught sight of our home fortress ahead. Up on the wall, Flower Queen spotted over 40 unknown figures approaching, and instantly shifted into high-alert combat mode, rallying her entire defense squad on the double, with bows drawn, completely ready for war. Honestly, I couldn't help feeling a bit proud. She didn't show even a hint of fear, staring down a massive crowd that completely outnumbered her, standing behind 3-meter walls on the high ground with arrows locked. She knew they'd be dropped long before touching the gate. I called out to let her know it was us, and she instantly eased up. As for Shio's people, though, the moment they caught sight of the stronghold, they froze in their tracks. Jaws hit the dirt, legs completely gave out, and their minds went totally blank, even those wolf tribe slaves. Those supposedly fierce fighters just stood there looking utterly lost. None of them had ever laid eyes on a structure this massive. I casually mentioned that this was just our main camp, and watched as their eyes nearly popped out of their heads. The gates swung wide open as everyone flooded inside, and Shio's clan immediately spotted the livestock farm, packed to the brim with sheep and boars. Back in their old days on that rugged mountain, foraging wild fruit and praying they wouldn't starve. They couldn't have pictured something like this in a million years. Turns out, during my 3-day trip, the workers had already managed to build 10 additional huts, bringing our total to 15. I called a full assembly to drop the official news. The mountain tribe is now officially merged into the Huasha tribe. One united tribe under one law. Bring any disputes straight to me. No settling grudges in secret, or you're getting kicked out. I then assigned Shio to study medicine under Director Wu, and distributed the 14 new guys across our 3 hunting squads, bringing them to 9, 8, and 10 warriors. We were turning into a legitimate fighting force. As for Luo, she reported harvesting and drying 500 fish in just 3 days. So I dispatched her team, along with 4 new women, to process the huge pile of game. We just hauled back, and then came the moment I've been waiting for. I headed over to the kiln with Old Man Bear, and began smelting raw iron ore. After hours of intense burning, I extracted the crude iron slag, a solid 40 pounds of it. Next, I crafted a clay crucible reinforced with wood ash, sculpted custom molds for a knife and a spear tip, and threw the whole setup into the furnace. By nightfall, that raw slag had fully melted into pure liquid metal. I carefully lifted the glowing crucible using a damp stick, poured the molten iron right into the molds, and just stood back, watching the metal harden. We literally went from throwing stones to casting iron. Meanwhile, everyone else was having absolute feast. During dinner, the newcomers stuffed themselves, until their stomachs were stretched like drums. Most of them hadn't tasted a proper meal in who knows how long. I could tell just by reading their expressions. Every single one of them was silently pledging their total loyalty to our tribe. And honestly, once you get a taste of our food, after years of surviving on bitter mountain fruit, I'd be swearing allegiance too. Once the clay molds cooled down, I gently tapped out the hardened metallic pieces, struck them together, and heard that magnificent metallic ring. Genuine iron, baby. I almost teared up right then and there. I called over Black Bull, Black Panther, and Flower Queen to watch me sharpen our very first metal blade against a whetstone. They literally forgot to breathe while watching. The moment I finished honing the edge, I tested it out. One single swing sliced right through a heavy log. Every single one of them started spouting complete nonsense, simply because their minds were utterly blown. Black Panther's hands were visibly trembling. The moment I handed the blade over to him, he took a swing at a log, and it sliced right through like butter. Flower Queen immediately snatched it out of his hands, because clearly, sharing is a concept my tribe hasn't discovered yet. I kept smelting batch after batch nonstop, until we had crafted 6 iron knives and 6 iron spearheads. Every single metal, shaving, and fragment left over from sharpening was carefully swept into a clay bowl filled with water, allowing me to collect all the iron filings afterwards and remelt them down so absolutely nothing went to waste. We were officially completely fresh out of iron ore, and the Stone Tribe's mine was a full day's trek away. At this point, every single gram of iron was basically pure gold to us. Black Bull swapped out his old stone tip for a brand new iron spearhead, jammed it straight into a solid block of wood, and yanked it back out without a single scratch on it. He then literally hugged the spear like it was a newborn infant, and straight up refused to let go, which left me completely unable to stop cracking up at this massive hulking guy, cradling a lethal weapon like a giant teddy bear. The following morning, I handed out all the fresh gear, giving each squad one knife along with 2 iron spears. Old Man Bear got a knife of his own. Red received one to use over in the kitchen, officially making her the absolute most dangerous cook in prehistoric history. And I kept the final knife for myself. And that was that. No more iron equipment until we secure more ore. Right then, I dropped a piece of news on the slaves that completely changed the game. Bust your tails, and you just might earn full membership in the tribe, along with all the equal rights that come with it. You could literally hear their motivation skyrocket in real time, right then and there. They immediately began grinding like their actual lives depended on it, which, let's be real, it kind of did, so I went to inspect the moat. The slaves had already made serious progress digging around our perimeter walls, spanning 500 meters long for meters wide, and going down 2 meters deep. My blueprints called for a trench set 10 meters out from the fortress walls, wrapping completely around the entire stronghold. Once it was fully completed, any invading force would be forced to funnel through the main entrance. I spotted a crystal-clear mountain stream nearby and drew up plans to lay down a bamboo pipeline to route the water straight down and flood the whole moat. Just give me 1 single month, and this base is going to become virtually breach-proof. Our slave count had officially reached 42 in total, which included 5 young kids, whom I assigned to Ren's livestock team instead of forcing them to dig. Sure, nobody freeloads in my tribe, but hey, I'm not a ruthless tyrant. Kids are meant to herd animals, not break their backs digging ditches. Hunting Squad 1 marched back into camp with 23 captured live goats, and checked in after setting up 50 traps across our territory. Meanwhile, the rabbit population was blowing up out of control. We already had 3 fresh litters, each pumping out 7 or 8 bunnies, pushing our total count way past 50 rabbits. Come wintertime, I'd save a few for breeding and send the rest to the dinner table. Plus, rabbit fur spins into some amazingly soft yarn. I was legit building a whole prehistoric agricultural empire out here. Our living situation was completely sorted with 30 huts constructed. Our squad leaders were granted their own private quarters, while regular tribe members bunked up 5 to a room, strictly divided by gender. And the slaves were packed 10 to a room right along the outer perimeter walls. I went ahead and set up 2 separate restrooms and wash stations for them, just to keep things civilized around here. Naturally, I claimed the biggest crib right in the middle. Perks of being the tribe's chief, you know? Later that night, during our meeting, I dropped a total game changer: surnames. Every real society needs last names, and people sharing one can't tie the knot. Simple rule to avoid awkwardness. For my original squad from the Falling Water tribe, their new last name would be Long, making me Long You Ben. Meanwhile, the mountain folks were assigned Sean, which turned Ju's name into Sean Ju. Honestly, it sounds more like exotic fruit than a warrior. Flower Queen asked what her new name would be, so I dubbed her Long Flower Queen. She loved how fierce it sounded and agreed on the spot. Man, she is ridiculously easy to win over, as long as you make her sound like a total badass. Right after that, I announced that married couples get their own private quarters, and instantly saw everyone's eyes sparkle. Turns out nothing motivates primitive folks quite like free real estate. Since nobody here even knew what marriage meant, I had to break it down like I was talking toddlers. 1 guy, 1 girl. You stick together, make some kids, and no messing around with anyone else, or you get exiled forever. Then I made the deal even sweeter. Get hitched, and you claim a whole house for yourselves. Suddenly, everyone was super hyped about getting married. The mountain tribe members just stood there looking awkward, since they were brand new and didn't know anyone yet. Hey, give it time, guys. Up next, I had to fix our branding issue. Our old symbol was water, theirs was a mountain, and frankly, both were totally outdated. So I grabbed a piece of charcoal, sketched a dragon on an animal hide, and declared it our brand new official emblem. Everyone stared at my artwork in sheer confusion, but I made it clear this bad boy was our new identity. I slapped it onto a pole right outside my doorstep. The very next morning, ultimate power move. After that, I crafted battle horns using 5 massive ram horns, drilling holes and cleaning out all the gunk inside. I gave one a blow, and a deep, thunderous sound echoed across the entire settlement. I taught everyone how to operate them, then laid down the law. These horns sound off for only 2 reasons: morning roll call or an enemy raid. If you skip morning assembly, that's 10 lashes with a stick and no food for a whole day. Blow for fun. Enjoy 2 full days of starving. I needed real discipline here, not a bunch of wild cavemen. Treating our war horns like party noisemakers. Bright and early the next day, Black Bull blew the horn at dawn, and every single soul came scrambling out. Like doomsday had just arrived. The slaves were completely clueless about what was happening, stumbling outside looking totally panicked. I made sure they understood that the horn means get to work, and they immediately grabbed their gear. Man, my training regime was working like a charm. I watched all 3 squads run through spear and shield formations, followed by some solid archery practice. The new recruits from the mountain tribe were catching on fast. Right after we finished up breakfast, I rounded up squads 1 and 2, a total of 18 warriors, and set off to meet Green Phoenix. I made sure to bring every single piece of iron gear we owned, completely bundled up in animal pelts, so nobody could catch a glimpse of our stash. I had 9 guys up front geared with shields, iron daggers, and spears, backed by another 9 armed with bows and quivers in the rear. Honestly, I looked like I was rolling out with a legit military task force. The entire march over, I was sweating bullets, wondering what would happen if Green Phoenix pulled up with hundreds of fighters. Because against sheer numbers like that, our shiny iron weapons wouldn't mean a thing. So my plan was to lay low initially, assess the situation, and cut our losses if things started looking hairy. However, the moment we reached the rendezvous spot, it turned out she had only brought roughly 15 people. I let out a sigh of relief, so heavy it could have blown them away. Green Phoenix wasted no time and got right down to brass tacks. 20 sacks packed full of salt stone. I nearly choked on the spot, especially when she casually dropped that normally. A single bag could trade for an adult cow or 20 sheep. This girl literally just handed me the payload of 20 cows, without batting an eye, and my expression must have been priceless, because she burst out laughing and reassured me that her Firebird tribe genuinely wanted to build a real friendship. All thanks to me saving her and Gully back then. Think about it. I saved 2 lives on a random impulse and scored 20 sacks of salt. Hand down the single greatest return on investment in human history. She was eyeing my men intense, paying special attention to our wrap gear and the archery unit, carrying bamboo quivers stacked with arrows. She even confessed she'd attempted to craft bows herself, after witnessing me wield one previously, only to fail miserably. That's when she popped the question, asking to visit my village. Every instinct told me to turn her down, but she had literally just dropped a fortune in salt right into my lap. And realistically speaking, her tribe could easily locate our massive fortress just by trekking half a day in literally any direction. You really can't hide a walled city, after all. Her entire crew was mounted on gigantic bulls. 15 riders, each riding a beast of their own. Those beasts moved slow, but man, they were built like absolute tanks. I was low-key green with envy, and mentally made a note to snag a few for myself later. Green Phoenix dismounted her beast and walked side by side with me all the way back, bombarding me with a million questions like, how big is your tribe? And how many people do you have? I casually played it cool and claimed we had around 80, knowing full well her own tribe boasted tens of thousands. We were basically running a tiny lemonade stand, right next to a megacorporation. But the second we pulled up to the fortress, Green Phoenix froze dead in her tracks. She just stood there staring open-mouthed at the massive walls and at Flower Queen security squad, who were stationed up top with bows locked and loaded straight at her face. And you could practically see her brain short-circuiting in real time. She had never witnessed anything remotely close to this level of defense. Honestly, her whole squad looked like they just caught sight of a real-life UFO. I quickly shouted up to Flower Queen to stand down and lower her weapons, reassuring her that these folks were allies, not enemies to shoot down, though I gotta admit, getting to witness Green Phoenix's mind being utterly blown was easily the most satisfying moment of my entire week. Green Phoenix requested to step inside my fortress, and I agreed, on the condition that she entered alone, which practically caused her bodyguards to lose their minds. Yet she quickly shut them down and marched right in, with the total confidence of someone who owned the place. As soon as the heavy gates slammed shut behind her, her warriors stuck outside looked like a bunch of helpless, abandoned puppies. Since she couldn't clear a 3-meter wall, I showed her the whole place, and it completely blew her mind. First stop was our mess hall, where she saw everyone queuing up with clay bowls and chopsticks to get served by Red's crew, sitting at actual wooden tables with real wooden chairs. She'd never seen structured dining in her life, even though her own tribe was tens of thousands strong. I handed her a pair of chopsticks, and she stared at them like some alien gadget, but she managed to figure them out in 2 minutes. A sharp woman, she was stunned. I explained that we feed our slaves meat, because they do heavy labor, so they need a decent meal, just not full servings. She looked at me like I was some kind of ancient, humanitarian saint. Look, I'm just keeping my workforce alive. But sure, call me generous. The livestock pen really blew her away, even if it was tiny, compared to what her tribe was running. She had cattle, chickens, rabbits, and antelopes, while we only had a few goats and some vicious wild boars. But for a tribe of our size, it was seriously impressive, and she knew it, though the houses were what really knocked her socks off. She walked inside one and saw the heated brick beds, the fireplace illuminating the entire room, fur blankets laid over the sleeping platform, and actual windows alongside peepholes in the door. I could tell she was dying to ask how we build all this, but her pride just wouldn't let her. Watching the leader of a massive megatribe be low-key jealous of my mud huts was honestly pure comedy. Up on the ramparts, she looked down and saw her own warriors, putting up crude, lean-to shelters, while my sentries patrolled above them armed with bows. The contrast hit her like a truck. Her tribe survived purely on sheer numbers, raw force, and heavy casualties every single time. Yet my tiny tribe had walls that could easily hold off hundreds. I could practically hear her thinking, Dad seriously needs to see this. She noticed the moat trench and asked what it was for, so I just play-acted and mumbled something about digging mud right near the walls for convenience. There was no way I was handing over my master defense blueprint to someone I'd only met twice, and she totally bought it, honestly. Maybe I was being a bit paranoid. After all, this woman handed me 20 sacks of salt yesterday, but a smart leader always stays cautious. I hooked her up with a private room for the night and assigned a woman to keep her fire going. She lay there, probably reconsidering her whole tribe's setup. As for me, I slept like a baby, because that's the peace of mind solid walls give you.